Yeah, it's good. You can eat it. Okay, guys, we're gonna get started. All right, welcome to the January 25th, 2024 BAR small meeting. My name is Lindsay Van Slambrook. I'll be your chairwoman this evening. Fellow board members present with me this evening are Bill Turner, Julia Martin, Bill Huey, and Fillmore Wilson. City staff present with me today are Frankie Pinto, Senior Preservation, BARS Administrator, and Travis Ghali, Preservation Planner. The order of today's meeting will be as follows. For each application, we'll get an introduction and overview of the project by city staff for the benefit of the board and the public. This will be followed by the applicant's presentation. Everyone's speaking for an applicant, so this would be property owners, designers, consultants, developers should speak during the applicant period versus during public comment. If you are speaking, please approach the podium and you'll have a 10-minute period of time for the full applicant presentation. By ordinance, the board can ask questions of the applicant at any time. By custom, we do so on the heels of the applicant's presentation. This will be followed by public comment. Any written public comments that were timely submitted have been provided to myself and other board members prior to the meeting, so we've had the opportunity to review. If you are speaking as a member of the public, please approach the podium. State your name first and last for the record, and if you are a neighbor, please state your address as well. Public comment will be followed by city staff comments and recommendations. And once we've heard from the public and city staff, the applicant will have a 5-minute period of time to clarify or to respond to anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations. Once we've heard from the public and the applicant, their presentation will be closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote. No one will be allowed to speak during our board discussion and vote. You may be asked a question, but other than that, no audience participation during this period. The following items have been withdrawn or deferred this evening. Agenda items 6 and 7, these are both 137 Bufane. Agenda item 8, 113 Cumming, and agenda item 10, 26 B Street. Everyone, please turn off your cell phones and remember that the purview of this board is architecture only. So issues related to zoning, livability concerns are not within the purview of this board and should not be voiced here. All right, so we will move to agenda item A1, review of the minutes from the November 9th, 2023 meeting. I make a motion to defer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Agenda item A2 is, I'll make a motion for approval of the minutes from the January 11th, 2024 meeting with my few edits that were circulated to staff and board members prior to the meeting. Do I have a second to my motion?
Second.
Fillmore, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. The motion passes unanimously. All right, agenda item B1, 12 Edens Alley. Frank, if you give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
12 Edens Alley is category 4 in Charlestown. The original structure is circa 1780 in the old and historic district, requesting approval for replacement window. This is the property's location on Edens Alley. Existing site photos. Some context of Edens. And sandboard map showing the history of the property. This is the structure in question. And I will turn it over to the applicants. I have a clicker up there, but it is very temperamental. So if it doesn't work, I'm happy to slip through slides for you.
Good. This house at 12 Edens is an interesting house. It was a historic house there until 1953, 1952, and 1953 it was taken down, and this house was built. So, there's a nice article in your package. It was in the newspaper about the repurposing of the brick on the front facade. Essentially, it's a 1953 structure. This images that you can see, the brick is just on the front and stuck up on the sides. The windows are 1953 vintage. They're in poor condition. Windows in this period, unlike our earlier houses, We're not built to blood pine or cypress, and we're built to yellow pine, and they're showing they're not as durable as our old windows. So we are asking to replace these windows. The photograph that you see of the showing the previous house and then the location of the new house. We're proposing to replace these windows with impact rated insulated glass. Given our newfound issues with hurricanes, you really can't easily put shutters on this house, so there's no protection for this single glazed windows. So we would like to bring them up to a higher standard to withstand storms and to make them more energy efficient, of course. We're proposing to use Colby windows, which I like the most of any windows, because the impact windows have maintained the narrow stiles and rails that you see in traditional Charleston. The styles and rails are 1 3/8 inches, which is pretty incredible, but most companies, when they go to impact, they end up with large window frames. So these, I've used these a lot. They really are believable to be a good replacement for a window that's in the historic district. So we're asking for approval to replace the windows with this product. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keys. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Thank you. Okay, do we have anyone speaking from the public? Frankie, if you give the city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Okay, since the board has denied the use of insulated historic windows or insulated windows in historic structures in the past, staff had the observation that simulated dividing light are inappropriate at the location and for a structure of the age. Staff recommendation is denial for that previous board decision.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Keys, would you like to respond to or clarify anything raised in the city staff comment to recommendations?
This is in the historic district. This is not our typical historic house built in 1953. So I think there should be some latitude in that. We should start be protecting our residents from storms. And I think this is an important thing to do. And, you know, we wouldn't ask to do this in an 1850s house, but it's a 1950s house. And I think there should be a different standard for modern houses. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
I sort of agree with the applicant on this one, given, you know, A, the distance from the street, B, the proposed windows and their details, and C, the real concerns about climate change and protection and just the age of the structure. I mean, just because they built it very well to look delightfully old, I don't think that's a reason to necessarily, you know, sort of limit them to using old windows. So I think what's proposed is reasonable for those reasons.
And I will add a caveat to the staff comments. The closest request we could find was for a 1940s house. So I'll just throw that in. It was a slightly older house.
This is a problem, an issue that's going to come up with us more and more in the future. Our policy statement does say wood should have light windows. You know, we've always tried to stick by our policy statements, but you know, I agree with Julia that yeah, what's being proposed is a good window. I mean, and we do need to adjust to climate change, but at the same time, I feel like we need to stick with board policy so that we're not setting precedents. And but I think this is an issue that we probably need to sit down at some point and actually review our policies on this.
I tend to agree with Bill on this. If it's in it's important to protect a 1954 house. It's just that much more important to protect an 1854 house. And so this is a good solution for protecting a 1954 house, then it would be a good solution for protecting an 1854 house. That's a very slippery slope in that argument. And so I certainly understand the desire to upgrade, and this house is technically historic under our guidelines. So I agree with you, it's a difficult situation, and it probably needs more clarification. But our policy is that the original windows in this house were single pane. I know they're 1950s and they're not great windows, but it's fine to replace them. But I do struggle a little bit with the argument that because it's a 1954 house, it's okay to change or to modify our guidelines. If the concern really is hurricane protection, there are really acceptable ways to provide hurricane protection other than shutters, or even IG windows that are appropriate for almost any historic structure. So I'm struggling with this one. I understand why they want to change the windows, but I'm a little concerned with that slippery slope of where our guidelines go. You know, is it okay for a 40s house? Or is it okay for a 50s house? Is it not okay for a 1920s house? We're sort of in a conundrum.
Where do you draw the line?
I have really one question I should have asked of the applicant. Lynn, are you going to have these windows, proposing to have these windows sized to fit, or are they going to be standard sizes? Are you going to modify the openings in what way? Or are you going to modify the openings at all?
All Kobe windows are sized to fit. They are
Sized to fit. And so, is there modification to the surround detail at all, the frame, as you will? Simply, but it's not a sash replacement. It's an entire frame.
But the
replacement.
masonry opening remains the same.
Okay, and then we finished with, is it some form of a brick mold that's on it now? And it would be the same. Yeah, I think we're kind of to points that have been made, you know, we're within the standards that we have now. I do believe wholeheartedly that we're probably going to need to take a look at the standards, especially in light of the fact that, well, you know, the thing that gives, I think, some structures a hierarchy, obviously historic structures that are of a certain age obviously should be considered definitely sacred to policy, but I think looking at more recently built buildings is something worth looking into because of the exact issue that is at play here, and the fact that the original window product that was used in the 1950s was basically inferior to, material-wise, inferior to some even older windows. And I do believe that a look at the way the policy accounts for those types of issues needs to be taken into consideration. But to your point, we have a policy now that doesn't have that leeway. It doesn't have that device in it. So I'm a little bit torn as to the application of the policy as it reads. I think that was your point too. Right.
But isn't that kind of why we're here to deal with nuances that come up in individual cases that aren't automatically, you know, covered by policy, that require a little more analysis and thought about the specific conditions and characteristics and ages and materials?
One thing that I could see as kind of some leeway on this one is the distance from the street.
Mhm.
It does sit pretty far back behind gates, so they're not highly visible. I don't think you could tell the difference from the street.
I agree with that. That house does sit way back from the street.
So if there's facts on this application that would perhaps not create a precedent for other applications because of the distance from the street. And if there's consensus among board members that the policy probably does need to be revised to allow us some leeway here, then I'm leaning towards approving.
Either revise or reconsider.
And I mean, in some regards, it reminds me of how 6 or 8 years ago, board policy was completely to deny people the option of elevating their houses. I mean, I'm not saying that we should wholesale suddenly allow everyone to have insulated windows, but you know, it's just these things have to evolve and we need to consider each case carefully. So I'm gonna make a motion for approval based on the age of the structure, the distance from the street, the quality of the existing windows, and the quality of the proposed replacements.
I'll second it.
So Julia made a motion for approval for replacement of the windows based on the age of the structure, the distance of the structure from the street, and the quality of the existing windows and the proposed replacements. Yes.
I'll second.
Turner. I'm gonna put the motion to a vote. Fillmore,
Nay, opposed.
Bill Huey,
I'll vote, yay in favor. I'll vote yay in favor.
Julia,
Stay in favor.
Bill Turner.
Yay in favor.
Chair votes in the majority and the motion passes 4-4 and 1 against. Thank you. Agenda item B2, 968 Ashley Avenue. Frankie, please give us an introduction overview of the project.
968 Ashley Avenue is a category 3, group 1 for our material line policy in Wagner Terrace circa 1935 in the historic materials demolition purview. They are requesting partial demolition of historic structure, including front stairs, front door, windows, and portions of wall. This is the property's location on Ashley Avenue. Existing site photos. A lot of existing site photos. Architectural survey from 2004. And then board map from 1944. And we will turn it over to the applicants.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
Am I supposed to be able to change drawings here?
You can, but like I was telling Mr. Keys, it's very fickle, so if it doesn't cooperate, I'm happy to do it for you.
My name is Dennis Shem. I'm architect, First Choice Design. And what we are proposing for this house, they've already had the interior renovated, but it doesn't work for the family, for the Adams that live there. So they're wanting to add bedrooms, more appropriately size the bedrooms. But the biggest thing is to make their kitchen, living, and dining room work better for them. And to do that, let me try.
That's all right, I'll flip for you.
To the, I think it's A3, it's the demolition drawing. Next one. Right up to there. Where we show the plotted areas is what we're proposing to remove in order to expand to the, well, if you're facing the house, it'd be to the right side of the house in order to make, and then it'd be like the next one, I think. proposed is A6. That's 7, that might be roof.
This goes into photos.
There's no A6.
This is A6.
Okay, well, that doesn't look like my A6, but, on the upper right-hand side there, what we're doing is we're adding on to the house for 12 feet by the, width from the existing front entry area to back where their deck presently is located. And then recreate a dining, kitchen, living in that space and put all the bedrooms along the bottom. So the only thing that you'll see that changes is the demolition of that one wall from the existing entry. I would call it a pod that's in the front top. From that point back to where it drops back and goes down where the deck's located. So the part that's demoing is that wall and then turn and the wall going up by the deck. And that would be on the pictures and we turn it also. That's the entry we want to take out. The Adams want to move that. There's a side and then they want to put the new entry where the new living room is. So it moves the entry to the right. That circle is, that comes off and we move the entry then to the right side. That door is actually kind of tucked. You go up the front porch, it actually turns and you have to turn to the left to even see that front door. That's on the drawing too on A6. And then where those windows are, we're proposing to put the new entry, a double door. Then on the right side there where you see the row of windows, that's the section of wall we're trying to take out in order to expand it to the right. And again, 12 feet by that depth that you see right there where the windows are. And because there's not enough brick to go back and refill, what we propose on our drawings then for the new addition is that siding matches siding that they actually have on a previous edition that's on the back of the house. And I think, yeah, right there.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
So you're hoping to remove the current front stairs and now enter from the side?
What it's doing is adding 12 foot on the right side of the house
I guess
And
I'm
then-
looking at the front porch elements, the front.
and then moving the front porch to that new section to make that the main entry into the living space. Because right now this door that's there, that would go into their bathroom for their new master. Plus, it's kind of awkward anyway. You walk up and you don't see an entry. The entry's off to the left side.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
April Wood, Historic Charleston, Bennington. HCF has reviewed the application for partial demolition of the historic structure, including the stairs, front door, windows, portions of the wall at 968 Ashley Avenue, and we appreciated the site visit this morning. This house is a wonderful example of Wagner Terrace architecture. Much of its original materials and character remains intact. We have several concerns about this application. The primary character defining feature of 968 Ashley Avenue is the front porch and stairs. The proposal to remove the front stairs and change the entry to the house will dramatically change the appearance of the house and detract from its historic character and charm. We feel strongly the house should address the street. We also believe that the window openings add to the character of the house. To change the form of the windows to make them French doors will also take away from the character of the house. Finally, we are concerned about the demolition of a large portion of the side wall. This is a large lot and there appears to be room to expand off the back. Expanding to the rear rather than the side will maintain the character of the house and property as a whole. We respectfully recommend denial of this application and urge the applicant to pursue alterations that are more sensitive to the historic house. Thank you.
Laurel Fay with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The PSC appreciated the chance to visit the site this morning. This is a unique historic house that retains a high degree of integrity. The PSC is not supportive of this heavy-handed scope of demolition proposed that would obliterate the house's original form and character-defining features. The reconfiguration of the primary entrance and the demolition of the front stairs are particularly inappropriate, and the historic fenestration pattern should be preserved. Given the size of the property and the existing modern addition, we encourage the applicant to pursue a more sensitive approach, focusing alterations toward the rear non-historic portion of the house. We ask the board to deny this request. Thank you.
Is there anyone else speaking? Okay, Frank, if you give the city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff observation, the front stair is a very visible and character defining feature and should be retained as existing rather than demolished. We did not have any concern with the removal of the walk between the sidewalk and the front stair. Front door and front door porch windows, as well as the south side wall and south side windows, are very visible and therefore should not be demolished. Rear non-historic addition already exists and expansion should occur here. Staff recommendation is denial of demolition of front stair, front door, window openings, and portion of the south facing wall.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Shum, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations? All right, public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
1935, that puts it at sort of the first part of the development of Wagner Terrace. So for Wagner Terrace, this is a very old home. I agree with both preservation groups that this house it's pretty special. It's got a lot of character, and what's being proposed, I think, is the removal of these historic elements will greatly diminish that character, especially things such as the flared front steps. You know, those are a major contributor to his character, and then the removal of such a large portion of the sidewall as well. So I have some major issues with this one.
Well, I have nothing to add.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. And I was just gonna add for the applicant's benefit that it might seem odd to have to walk onto the porch and turn 90 degrees to go inside, but that's kind of a common situation in Wagner Terrace with these bungalows. I think there's one right across the street that is configured the same way. So I think that's pretty special. And, you know, I would like to think there is a way to expand a little bit to the north, possibly even in the area, the general area where you'd like to, but I think it could be done with a lighter touch and some sort of hyphenation. So I recognize it's a double lot and, you know, I think I personally wouldn't want to say that there could never be an addition toward the north. But this particular one, I think, yeah, it's just the request for demolition is just a little excessive, I think, in terms of that north wall.
I agree with maybe, it's not that you couldn't expand to the side. It's just how do you do it? It could possibly be done with a much lighter touch, like you said, with some sort of a hyphen, you know, which we do all the time further down the peninsula.
So I'll go ahead and make a motion for, well, let's just follow staff's recommendation, denial and demolition of the front stair, front door and window openings. And portion of south, that's north facing wall, is that what you?
Tori rewrote
No.
the comment, so I'm not,
It's south facing, south facing.
I think you're correct.
I'm reoriented, no, I think it's south facing, you're right. As submitted.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for denial of demolition of the front stair, front door and window openings and portion of the south facing wall as submitted. Do I have a second to Julia's motion?
I'll second.
Put the motion to a vote. Bill Huey,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Turner,
Yeah, in favor.
Julia,
In favor.
Bill
Yeah, in favor.
Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 3 is 2 Piedmont Avenue. Frank, to give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
2 Piedmont Avenue is a category 4 fruit to Magna Terrace circa 1940 in the historic materials demolition purview. We are requesting partial demolition of historic structure, including front porch, shed additions, and asbestos siding. This is the property's location on Piedmont. Some existing site photos. Context of Piedmont. Architecture inventory in 2004. And Sanborn maps from 1955. And we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I don't really have as much prepared as some of the other folks, but I sort of, it's all pretty simply, clearly stated in what we're requesting, which is demolition of the front porch, which is in really bad shape. Truthfully, it's falling down, so we would plan to demo that, and it would be rebuilt. And of course, the side structure, which apparently is not original to the home, is also in very poor shape, which would be demolished in order to be reconstructed. And of course, the asbestos shingles are asbestos, and we're missing portions of them, and you can't replace those anymore for good reason, as we all know. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant?
So, yeah, the request is to remove the front porch.
And to be rebuilt.
Yes. I guess I gotta ask that question, as original or with a modification?
A modification of making the porch extend across the whole front end of the house. But it's incidentally, I was told under my first meeting with someone with the bar that what we did for the rebuilding was really of no concern of the board, but
That is-
you know, that doesn't mean that we're planning to do something bad.
No, he's trying to
and-
figure out if
and
we
that
want
is
to
absolutely-
rebuild it and we can consider it a repair, or if it's going away and then changing and we have to consider it a demolition. That was the reason for the question.
We're in an interesting area of town where we can only look at what you're
Figured I
taking
could-
away and we
Yeah.
have no purview over what you put back. So it's sort of weird when we're looking at things and someone wants to remove a piece of a roof to build an addition. We can only think about removing a piece of a roof. It's sort of odd, so.
Right, and
That's right.
with the porch, right, exactly what Frankie said, if you're taking it apart to repair it, in other words, it's different than demolishing it.
Correct. I see. I hear you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
Laurel Fay with the Preservation Society of Charleston. While we do not have an issue with the proposed demolition of the one-story shed roof addition or the removal of the asbestos siding, the form of the front porch and its intact raptor tails should be preserved as a character-defining feature of the property. We ask for that portion of the demolition request to be denied.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for partial demolition of the historic structure, including the porch, shed addition, and asbestos siding at 2 Piedmont Avenue, and we appreciate the site visit this morning. This house is a good example of Wagner Terrace architecture. Much of its original materials remain intact. The primary character defining feature of this house is the front porch. In fact, this feature is found on the house next door. The proposal to remove the front porch will dramatically change the appearance of the house and take away from its historic character. We are opposed to this change. We also believe that the asbestos siding is original to the house and contributes to the character of the house. Asbestos is a good quality and durable product when it is left alone. We recommend patching the areas with missing siding with a hardy product that matches the asbestos. We have no objection to the removal of the non-historic shed addition. We respectfully recommend denial of the changes to the porch and the siding and approval of the removal of the shed addition.
Is there anyone else speaking from the public? All right. Frankie, please give us city staff comments and recommendations.
Staff observations, the front porch is a very visible and character defining feature and should be retained as existing rather than demolished. Staff had no concerns over the demolition of the side expansion, which holds no architectural or historic significance. Related to the removal of siding, BR policy would allow a replacement that matches the existing product in profile. And this could be handled within a building permit, and I will strike the rest of that because we did discuss that this morning and we don't believe that there's anything beneath the asbestos siding, so. I will just leave the staff observation with that first part. Staff recommendation is denial of demolition of front porch, approval of the demolition of the side expansion, and deferral for additional information. Sorry, I didn't edit my comments after our site visit. There's not original site to be found. So we'll just say denial of the demolition of the front porch and the asbestos and approval of the site expansion demo. And apologies for me not editing that after this morning.
And Mr. Goodman, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations?
I'll do my best.
And you don't need to, but if you've got anything.
Well, I would just like to add, as much as I appreciate the positions on this, my plan certainly would not be to everyday the historic character of this home. In fact, my plan would be to try to preserve it as well as possible, but also make it better for a new generation and for a new family. The porch is in bad shape. We are planning on elevating the home currently, and that's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to achieve with that porch intact. And the porch is in very poor shape. So I would only ask for another consideration on the demolition of the porch, with the understanding that a new porch would be built with every attention to making it as close to the historic character currently of the home, just slightly larger. And therefore, I believe would have more curb appeal and more function. I guess that's about it. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, public comment in the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. I think the important thing about the porch on this is that it gives some dimension to the house. It gives some variation to the roof line. So it's the roof line of the porch, which I think is the main character defining feature. But other aspects of the porch, I would be comfortable with going, such as the iron columns. I noticed this morning, one of the piers, I believe it's the one to the right, is canting out. So, you know, of course, the piers will need to be removed, rebuilt. So to me, it's preserving the roof form of the porch. It is, I think, is what's important. As far as the addition to the side, I have no issue with that. The little shed addition, and the asbestos siding, yeah, I'm kind of on the fence on that, you know, it's got a bad rap. Maybe it's the name that gives it a bad rap, but it's fine as long as you don't disturb it, and you can match it, you know, it's available in cementitious products. And once you get into taking that off, it's how do you deal with the reveal around the windows? You're going to need to create deeper trim, you know, to handle anything that could go on it. But like I said, I think the most important thing is the form of the porch roof.
And I don't disagree with Bill at all, and you can elevate that porch roof with the house
Yeah.
and leave the masonry where it is and deal with it differently. So you can elevate that house with the porch roof attached. And I agree with that right column is dislodged, so they're probably just yeah.
How about the
There's nothing, I think our observation showed that there was nothing underneath the asbestos siding, but the sheathing. So it wouldn't. I understand, like you say, it's got a bad rap. The name alone is enough to make people want to get rid of it. Left in situ and undisturbed, it's pretty benign. And it is repairable, so.
Toxic siding.
Hmm.
But that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
What?
That's what it sounds like,
Yeah,
toxic,
it's
scary
not
siding.
friable.
Yeah, it's not friable,
I-
as long as you don't mess with it.
Yeah, I agree with comments. I think Bill, you gave a very good summary.
Thank you. The policy about replacement of materials doesn't have any specifics, right? It doesn't mention asbestos siding specifically, right?
I don't think it calls out asbestos specifically, but as there is a cementitious product that matches the profile of the asbestos, I think we had been considering that a replacement in kind for these group 2 structure.
I'm just thinking like, in theory, some aluminum siding could become historic and, you know, like where do we draw the line? But it sounds like there's some love for the asbestos siding here and there.
Well, our original hope was that there was wood siding beneath it. We could say, oh, we'll match the wood siding with a hardy product. But Fillmore dashed that hope this morning.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially if you're going to elevate the structure, then the porch floor foundation would have to be rebuilt. So just that roof form, I think is pretty key. And personally, I'm probably on the fence about preservation of that particular siding, but just let someone else make a motion.
I'm okay with the removal of siding, but I'm probably in the minority on the board. But
Actually, I understand why people want to take it off because there's psychologically, you know, you know, they consider it a hazard, which of course, under certain circumstances it is. So I am not completely opposed to taking the asbestos siding off. I
Especially,
think, you know, we sort of, you know, we don't know what goes back afterwards, but I think that you know, it is a character defining feature, but it also is, I understand why people want to get rid of it. If it was my house, I'd leave it alone. It's almost bulletproof. But I understand why people
I think I consider
want
the
to get rid of
board
it.
porch more of a character defining feature than the asbestos siding. But I also, Bill Huey always makes a good point in these applications that with respect to the porch, just note that a denial of demolition does not mean that you cannot full-scale repair and rebuild the porch in its current form. That, again, we're in an odd area of our purview where while we believe you have the best of intentions, if we approve full-scale demolition of that porch, you could go back and you could put anything in its place.
Would
So-
it help for a future date to submit plans and drawings of the proposed?
It wouldn't, because we don't have any purview. So we don't have any authority to approve what you're putting in its place. Again, it's a really odd,
Maybe that might play a factor in your decision to allow them.
and unfortunately not in this area of town, but I just want to note that this doesn't mean that you can't completely repair and rebuild the porch, but it would be a staff review repair permit. But just the form of the porch as it is. So this would take care of the concern that, hey, this porch is falling apart, you need to elevate the home. You would be able to do that, but you need to keep the form of the porch, if you get what I'm saying.
Lowering the roof line. Right, roof line,
Yes,
Which is what I'm really hoping to extend the roof line with the existing.
Yeah.
roof line
Yeah.
to have them make it-
unfortunately.
And for what it's worth, even if you brought that to us, if it were within our purview, I can't imagine that we would bond with that, or it would change our mind. You know, that's the land of hypotheticals, but just so you know.
That's all I have to say, so I'm in line, except the asbestos, I'm okay with removal of that, I'm okay with the shed.
I would like to ask the applicant one more question, if I may. What siding were you thinking you would replace that with?
At a glance,
Hardy?
it looks very similar, but it's, in my opinion, it has a much stronger curb appeal. And then-
Like a typical thin hardy plank kind of?
It's either gonna be hardy plank or wood siding.
Can't play that in.
Well, it's just that if that became part of the replacement policy, for, you know, if we wanted to consider that if you're replacing asbestos, this could be considered in kind, you know, something just to.
So I need to
Think
agree
about for
on
the
the
future.
revision of the.
I don't know, maybe.
Maybe a sentence that could be added to that policy.
I'll discuss two policy changes.
So. In the interest of time.
Julia, were you going to make a motion?
Make a motion. Motion would be, approval of demolition items with the exception of the demolition of the roof, porch roof itself, the roof structure, form, however,
And form.
yeah.
And form.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor for approval of demolition, and I'm just gonna spell it out, approval of demolition of the shed addition and the asbestos siding, and denial of demolition of the front porch and roof form.
Well, I think there are elements of the front porch.
Cover structure.
So just the roof form.
We're talking about basically anything above the column line.
Denial of demolition of the roof form of the front porch.
And roof form and details of the front. Just put it that way, because that clarifies the rafter tails, which are important to that roof. form.
Right.
It's a roof form and details, just add and.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah. I think so.
All right, so I'm gonna repeat the motion. So approval of demolition of the shed addition, the asbestos siding, and denial of demolition of the roof form of the front porch and details.
Roof form and details.
Roof
of the
roof form
front
and
porch.
details of the.
Thank you.
Just say roof and details, 'cause repair would. you don't need that.
All right, do I have a second to Bill Turner's motion?
I'll say.
Keep on one. The motion to a vote, Julia,
I'm yay in favor.
Bill Turner,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey,
Yeah, in favor.
Fillmore.
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, agenda item 4, 200 Gordon Street. Frankie, please give us an introduction and overview of the project.
200 Gordon Street is a category 4, Route 2 in Wagner Terrace, circa 1940 in the historic materials demolition purview, requesting partial demolition of historic structure, including front stairs and the front hip roof. This is the property's location on Gordon Street. Existing site photo. We were right, it did have an awning. The awnings are no longer. Context of Gordon Street. Architecture inventory from 2004. And a sandboard map showing the history of the structure. And I will turn it over to the applicant who also has some sandboard maps.
Thank you. Joel Adrian. Sorry. My voice, number 200 Gordon. Project is basically the owner would like a front porch on the house. Let's see if I can get this to work. Right, left?
Right, left, and try aiming it at my computer.
So 1944 Sanborn map. Then 51. So we'll go with, this is the existing house, I think. If you look at the Sanborn map, you can see the depth of the house on the lot. And then you look at the existing survey, and you see there was an addition to the rear, which is fine. I just point that out for context. We're really focused on the front of the structure. The goal is, you see that change there, is just to add that front porch. The struggle with the project doesn't come in to adding a front porch. It comes into the existing form that is there. And the existing, when I looked at this house, you know, look at the Sanborn map, clearly there were always the two different roof forms, 1951. But when I look at where the entry is, I'm like, why would they put the entry there? The entry looked like it should have gone to the porch side. And then similar to the other application, it'd be a right-hand turn to get into the house through a front door on the side. I don't think that's how it is, but when you look at that existing front elevation, the challenge of trying to work with it is the front left corner where you have the two different roofs. You have the hip roof, you have the gable roof, but they spring from the same overhang, same corner. And so trying to get a front porch to come forward from that and not modifying, I was struggling with it. So my thought was to just really redesign the front porch, take the existing main gable roof, the large one, extend that ridge. You'll see that on the side elevation. Extend that ridge and then add the front porch. Put the stairs back. Clients have a front porch. The house does obviously look different, but contrary to the other Wagner Terrace homes, I wouldn't say that this one is a good example of Wagner Terrace architecture. So the hope is that we could do this. I would like you to ask the question, depending on how this goes. I'll ask that later. So I don't know that I have really a whole lot to add, other than we're trying to keep it simple. There's some additional photos of the existing house. And then I will ask or answer questions.
Any questions?
Was there any thought given to kind of reopening the existing side porch?
The discussion was had that, you know, once you gain square footage, it's very difficult to get someone to give it back. Which is obviously, actually, I have an application coming hopefully in the next meeting for 24 Jasper, where he's reestablishing the double piazzas. So, yeah, this one, no, they did not want to give up that little bit of space in the front.
And then, well, that's it. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Is there anyone speaking from the public?
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for partial demolition of the historic structure, including the front stairs and front hip roof at 200 Gordon Street. And we appreciated the site visit this morning. Based on the site visit, we believe much of the material requested for removal is historic and original to the house. We further noted that the house to the east has a similar enclosed porch. The front of the house, including the stairs and the enclosed front porch, are primary character defining features. The proposal to remove these elements will dramatically change the appearance of the house and detract from its historic character. We suggest that the applicant restudy the existing historic features and enhance the appearance of the front porch by reestablishing some of the historic features. We respectfully recommend denial of this application. Thank you.
Laurel Fay with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The PSC had the chance to visit the site this morning, and while the evolution of the front facade is not entirely clear, there is a significant level of intact historic material that should be preserved, and it is possible that the current configuration reflects the original porch footprint. We feel there's room to explore reopening the existing enclosed porch, but the form of the primary gable roof should be retained rather than extend forward to ensure legibility of the original roof lines. Thank you.
Is there anyone else speaking? Okay. Frankie, please give us city staff comments and recommendations.
Staff observations. The footprint appears to be original, but staff found the use of so much brick at the front of the house, which is clad in siding, to be very unusual. Windows are a character defining feature and appear to be original to the structure and should be retained. Staff recommendation is denied.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Adrian, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in city staff comments?
Sure, thank you. I know that I'm gonna. Yeah, so yes, I disagree with any of the comments. But I did my best to try to get a porch in front of the house. Let me ask this question if I could, as just to save me if I need to create a new application. But if you look at that little front door, if I were to create a stoop and the request was only for demolition of the stairs and then to reconstruct it and just at least get a 3-foot stoop that comes out, we could break the gable right here, have a little column out here, so someone could be standing under cover while they open the door. Is that something that has to come back to this board, or could we handle that denial so you could remove the front stairs and rebuild?
That's a good question for staff.
If
We could,
you are interested as a board in approving just the demolition of the front stairs, then we could, yes, handle that at staff.
you could handle what? Okay.
So that would be dependent on whether or not you were willing to approve the demolition of the stairs.
We'll discuss during.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. All right, public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
I think the house has got an interesting composition. You have the sort of the main body behind it, and you have the element to the left, and then the gable that protrudes out. I think it's got an interesting form. I understand what you're talking about, the roof intersection of that enclosed porch and the eave that was out there today. It was real, that's a very awkward intersection, but that's not really what we're here for. I think there's a way to get a porch on this house without, wholesale changing the front of it. It may be just a matter of extruding out that front lower gable and creating a porch that way. That doesn't change the overall form of the house. But I agree with staff that I think the demolition is a little heavy.
By implication, you would be willing to entertain demolition of the front stairs?
Definitely, yes.
I think I could do that too. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I think I could entertain that, especially in light of what Joel said about potentially basically rebuilding them, or I would assume in a very similar configuration. I do support staff's recommendation, based on the fact that I appreciate the solution you've come up with because it is totally logical. But what it does is it really masks the original form of the house, which is intact. So that would be the loss that really wouldn't be worth it. So, but I agree with the steps.
I'm in agreement, and while it's weird to approve demo of steps, they have to rebuild something there because we're not approving demolition of that form or the door, that, so.
Frankie, could you mind flipping back for the survey card? If I'm not mistaken, it looks like the eaves were tighter on that. Even 40 years ago. Well, no, maybe not. Never mind, they're still colliding.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a weird way they.
all right, well, I'll make a motion for approval of the demolition of the front stairs and denial of the rest.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for approval of demolition of the front stairs and denial of demolition of the front hip roof. I think, yeah, I would say denial of the balance of the request. Denial.
You could word it the other way and make a motion for the denial, and except for the approval of it.
Approval,
You just don't have to name them that way. That's all I was getting at. Anyway,
I'll say approval of demolition of the front stairs and denial of demolition of the remainder of the application. Do you have a second to Julia's motion?
So,
Good. You, I think you won. All right, put the motion to a vote. Bill Turner,
yeah, in favor.
Bill Moore,
Yeah, in favor.
Julia,
Any in favor?
Bill Huey.
yeah, clear.
Chair votes majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Adrian. Okay, agenda item 5, 101 Hanover Street. Frankie, if you'll give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
Thank you all.
101 Hanover Street, it is not surveyed in East Side circa 1910, and historic materials demolition survey, requesting complete demolition of the structure. This is the property's location on Hanover Street. Existing site photos. Some context of Hanover Street. And sandboard maps showing the history of the property. Right over to the applicant.
Evening, John Sullivan with SR Studio, representing the owner. Going for complete demolition is not something we do lightly, but I think everyone that's went to the site this morning saw this, how bad the structure is. The brick wall on the neighbor's property is probably holding up the structure from complete collapse. Since we made the application, the city's gone on and put a big red X on the building. There's not much historic material left, and you also have to raise it for flood. I don't think the structure would survive that, so basically pretty much have to rebuild everything, and nothing of the historic structure would be left to do that. I'll answer any questions. I think this is a fairly, not an easy question, but I think it's pretty obvious. Thanks.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Do we have anyone speaking? All right. Frankie, if you give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Okay, staff had some observations. The structure sits among similar forms and is or was part of a regulated street rhythm. The exterior has been clad in a number of different materials and inconsistent elements. Original materials appear to be limited to small portions of the roof, walls, and chimney. Front element was added and the side porch enclosed prior to 1944. Therefore, the side porch hasn't been visible for at least 80 years. Rehabilitating the structure would require raising it to FEMA standards. Staff recommendations due to the limited material integrity and loss of original form approval.
Thank you, Frankie. Would you want to respond to or clarify anything?
I agree with staff.
Thank you. All right, public comment in the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
I would normally be, it would be interesting if you could save that little section that's early, that's original, or the form of it, but it's so buried in there that I think even the form is gone, so. I reluctantly agree with staff on this one.
I think this is why site visits are important. Sometimes we go to sites and we see, oh, there's so much more of the structure than we thought. And going to this one, there was so much of the form. And I'm concerned about that brick archway to the east of the property that's really holding up the structure. So I approve demolition.
Make a motion. Approval of full demolition.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for approval of full demolition. Do I have a second to Bill Tweener's motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Phil Moore. The motion to a vote, Bill Huey,
Yeah.
Julia,
In favor.
Bill Turner,
Yeah, in favor.
Phil Moore.
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, agenda items 6 and 7 related to 137 Bufane Street have been deferred by staff. Agenda item 8, 113 Cumming Street has been deferred by the applicant. So we are on agenda item 9, 68 Cannon Street. Frankie, could give us an introduction overview of the project, please?
68 Cannon Street is a category 4 in Canberra, Elliottboro, circa 1840 to 1852 in the Old City District, requesting conceptual through final approval for alterations to previously approved plans. This is the property's location on Cannon Street. Existing site photos. I'm gonna skip through some of these because these were my contacts from the previous submittal with the after the fact. Context of Cannon Street. And architecture inventory. And Sanborn maps. And I'm gonna skip through the rest of those because they were for the other item actually. And we'll turn it over to the applicant.
George was supposed to be here. He's the owner, but he told me he was picking up his children and might be late. So I guess he's obviously late. George asked me to bring the samples. This was basically what I was asked to bring. You could flip back
Of
and
the-
forth me.
Photos of the,
Yeah, the structure's in the back from the street view. There you go.
Here?
Either or. Can you go one more? No.
Other way.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, as you can see in this photo, there's actually two structures. One is I believe it's a 212 shed roof, very, very low pitch. And then we have this other brick structure going up in the back. I'm not a part of the construction, just the roofing system. I don't know if you guys want me to bring a smaller piece of the roofing material up to you and you can pass it around or how you would like to look at this.
I'd like to see the small one and the big one, so.
Sure.
Thank you.
And that is.
Right here.
and that is
Yeah,
slapped-
if you're gonna-
is that the size and then it's slapped over.
It is. So I
that
brought,
width?
so this is a size 1 tile.
Okay.
There's size 1, 2, 3, 4, and size 5 tiles. The only ones that have the photovoltaic cells in them are the size 6 tiles, which are obviously in my hand right now. The reason why you have different size tiles is because if you have a hip roof or a roofing system that's very intricate, obviously I can't cut the glass because it would just not be glass anymore. So you have all of these different sizes, and then, like, for instance, on this roof in specific, because it is a hip roof up there. The ridge cap is gonna be a metal just like this. It's a galvanized metal, it's painted black. You have a very similar texture on what's called dragon scale, that's what we call it. And the dragon scale is running down the actual hip and it intersects with the glass.
So in order to be operable, you're saying the single individual component has to be that big, right?
So this is your main shingle,
Uh-huh.
right? This is what's going over. I would say for the hip roof system, 85% of the roof, because this is all of the ones that are producing the energy for George's property and the Charlestonian. The one that is the low pitched roof, which is I think it's 212, might be 312, don't quote me on that. That one is also gonna be probably 85 to 90% of this size. And then very minute amount of the small tiles. Yeah, because it's just a straight shed roof. You know, there's no intricacy to it.
Would the elevation of the side or the roof plan be helpful for discussion?
And we can go, unless you've got more to present, I'm sure you all have more questions, so we can.
I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of questions, so we can just.
George, go ahead.
Andrew Gold was caught off guard by all the deferrals. He's on the way right now.
Sorry.
But if we just want to stick with the solar roof, then we can change to the stair that you wanted to address, sir. We can do that too. But if you want to stay on top of the solar. We can do that.
So are those elements drawn like to scale? Those kind of
Yes.
shingle
Yes.
forms are to
Yes.
scale?
Yes. Yeah.
And where's this, which shed roof you were talking about? The one.
So we would, on the original shed, we would like to do this, but if Mr. Wilson mentioned that he would like to see the turn metal rim, it's either way. I mean, we would prefer to basically be, I mean, we can't be net zero here, but to get as close as possible, that we can get very close. If we do that, given the limited visibility, I'd like your consideration.
Frankie, would you mind returning to that sort of rendering of the public view?
How do you handle the hips? How do you handle the hips where this material comes together?
Where that's.
Small shingles fill in, and then there's like a
So-
metal cap.
So for instance,
That's not really all you see from the public. That's all you will see of the brick.
try to demonstrate for you.
You have the other diagrams. You know, one more. One more.
You can see down the driveway, right, to the shed too, right?
And this discussion last time about the stair.
Yeah, these were addressing the question about the stair.
He said it's asking what does this.
I was just looking to see what of the roof of the shed would be visible
Oh, shed.
from the street, just in consideration of the roofing.
The shed roof was originally called out as metal, but I think you would like to put this on it as well. Is that right?
The distance between 70 Cannon and 68 Cannon in that triangle right there is 8 feet wide. So to give you these, that's what you're looking at, and it's 280 feet back from this.
We're just kind of chatting with these guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Bill's question.
Yeah, that would be useful to ask questions. We have
So
big
for
names.
instance, let's say, I'll use this, obviously this is a rough metric, but say this is your hip coming down from the ridge side down to the eave. All of this is this exactly. And then you have what's called dragon scale, which looks exactly like this. It's just metal. And that sits on top of it. That's your actual cap.
Okay, so, because these are, you don't cut these to fit
Correct.
the hip.
That's why you have that
Yeah,
dragon
you
scale
have-
that goes on top of them.
Okay,
Same as the ridge cap. My
Okay.
ridge cap is not meant to ever ventilate a structure. It's meant to ventilate my roofing system.
okay, I got you.
Could we maybe scroll through your example photographs of installations, just to look at those? I think that's something it is.
You have a picture of the ridge cap? And your,
Yeah, I do as well.
Because the ridge and the hips are all gonna have that cap on.
Yes, sir.
Just to see what it looks like in small.
There it is.
That's just, and
That's-
how wide is that ridge cap on each side? Generally? 5 inches?
Generally, you're probably gonna be in a range of 8 inches for the cap.
And it's this size panel. on
That's
this.
correct.
Okay.
And you'll notice when I was trying to talk about the dragon scale metal, that's all of the metal interaction down through here. And that interacts with your cap. The glass comes into the metal, then you have a metal cap.
I'm thinking of Game of Thrones, dragons.
Yeah.
That's what Tesla calls it, so I gotta roll it.
Do not disobey.
Yeah, I would use this opportunity to ask questions about these tiles in general, since we may be seeing more of these.
And you were trying to hold out for Andrew to come and talk about the stair?
We can, I definitely can address it, fairly quickly if, Ms. Frankie, if you'd like to go to those, angles and then those views. Right, okay, so in the previous submittal, and approval of the board, the stair was simply inverted. And, due to building code, this is, 10 feet, or excuse me, I'm sorry. The, 10 feet right here from the property line means you cannot exit it, you cannot have that stair within that 10 feet, so we need to invert it as shown right here. In doing so, you'll notice that you no longer even see the window. So the stair is practically not visible, which is the right way. Now, it previously, as approved, it was, well, here you go.
Sorry about that. I didn't expect you to defer everything right ahead of us.
Looks bad.
Sorry, Andrew, the meeting's a little crazy.
Yeah. So I don't know where you just were, but again, this points out the main visibility, is coming up the neighbor's driveway where you see most of the front side of the building. So by reversing the staircase, the staircase is actually less visible than it was before. Almost all of this is dropping below the level of the wall along this property line. So you really wouldn't see that stair whatsoever. You just see the edge of the landing there.
Right.
So then, yeah, the shingles themselves,
Andrew, we've looked at his and heard from the supplier, unless there's just something else. you
Okay.
wanna add.
We stalled a little bit,
Yeah.
waiting.
okay, you've been through this already? Sorry, I thought I stepped
That's
in the middle of it. Well, I guess the last thing I'll say is just that the full drawing set follows that, but you've seen that last week. Staff's had that a long time now. So I'm hoping we can just final approve everything. There really shouldn't even be any need for further review by staff because it's absolutely 100% construction documents.
Thank you. Any further questions?
A couple of questions about the roof again. I guess there's probably 2 warranties associated with a roof like this. One is the generation. So there's some warranty that it's going to generate X amount of power for so long with some diminishing return.
Correct.
And the other thing is it's going to protect the structure and keep the water out for X.
Correct. So I'll touch on
Can you
both.
tell us a little bit about
Yes, sir.
that?
So the product itself, this specific tile, the ones with the photovoltaic cells, they have a 25-year manufacturing warranty. And the degradation, which is what you're referencing, is at 85% at year 25 under warranty. Obviously, that's a year
The
over year.
degradation is 85% or the
You're at
production?
85%.
You're at 85.
Yes,
The
sir.
production is 85%.
Your production is 85% at year 25 under warranty.
What about the physical life of the material?
I mean,
That's what's
Elon.
going to keep the water out of the building.
Sure. So Elon calls it a 100-year roof. I mean, we're roofers at the end of the day, so I'm a little more realistic with things in life. I mean, we're not building rocket ships at our company. All day long, I mean, we believe that it's a 50 to 60-year roof. I don't really see anything on earth ever lasting 100 years, but the nice thing about the product is it is a tempered glass roof system. It truly doesn't degrade. It's just up there. The bottom encasement is metal. You have silicone inside it. You have your electric diodes. Those things are going to degrade before the actual glass, and then the foots itself. So I call it 50 to 60. Elon says 100 though, so
I love how you.
we're a
put
little.
Elon.
Lost.
It's
What's
great.
what's the wind rating?
166. Yes, sir. 1.75" hail rating, Class A fire. I installed these all the way from Maine to Georgia.
Have you done anything locally in the Charleston area yet?
This will be our first in the historic district.
How about surrounding areas?
We have one in the queue in Mount Pleasant. It's currently a new build up. So it's not completed at this level. Majority of them are Hilton Head Islands, Tybee Islands. One of the other, can you go back one? Or I'm not sure which way. That's in the middle of nowhere in Statesboro. He has an orchard farm next to it. That's actually a 48 kW Tesla solar roof. We're pretty darn close to net zero on that property. He's got 8 power walls as well. So it's a cool product overall.
What's the power of the, this roof? How much would it generate?
Georgia specific roof, I believe we were about 10 kW, something right in there. So he has a power production factor of about 1.2, so somewhere in a range of 12,000 kilowatt hours.
Not if the, shed were included, right? The whole thing?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Any other questions? All right. Okay, do we have anyone speaking from the public? Frankie, please give us city staff comments and recommendations.
Okay, so staff confirmed the limited visibility of the proposed stair. And our concern was just the finish of the proposed Tesla shingle is very shiny, and staff is concerned about the visibility of the product and how it fits into the historic context of the district. Staff is recommending final approval of the structure and denial of the Tesla product as we didn't feel qualified to assess it based on the pictures.
Thank you, Frankie. Did you all want to respond to or clarify anything in the city staff comment?
I can, if you don't mind. We have a technical letter from Tesla Energy directly. In terms of reflectivity, this is something that we've struggled with in the past with ARBs on Hilton Head, especially up north and our Connecticut markets as well, because there's a lot of the golf course communities. We have a reflectivity less than 2%. It's a reflectivity study report. I don't know if we need to submit that, to the bar for review from Tesla. But I will say this, I've actually brought ARBs to these sites and have a metal roof next door, and the metal roof is more luminous than my roofing system from ground level. Obviously from a drone, at that angle, the sun is much more reflective than down on the ground. But if that letter would help, I'd be more than happy to share or a site visit to any of our sites.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we install sort of silver gray galvalume roofs all the time in the historic district, and they're clearly more reflective than this. But also what I want to point out is, if we were talking about like a historic building and like a hand crimped, copper roof versus this, that would be a whole different question. But on a new build, really what we're talking about here is the typical alternative to this is asphalt shingles and then getting approval for photovoltaic panels mounted on top of the asphalt shingles. That's something that the city generally approves on non-historic buildings. And those are very cumbersome and ugly compared to these, and they're smoother glass, so they're shinier. So I think, in the spirit of trying to find a way of getting photovoltaics onto new construction and make it look better than the current option of panels on top of asphalt shingles, I think this is undoubtedly better looking than that.
Thank you. Okay, public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. So we'll move into board discussion and a vote.
I think it's great.
I think we have to be sensitive to appropriate innovations that promote energy efficiency. I think that's important that we do that. I think particularly about new construction. This is new construction.
I agree, and I think I want to see this tested out somewhere.
Mhm.
And I think this particular application is probably the best because it sits far back off the street. So if it's a disaster, it's not. It's not on
the street.
It's not right up on the street, so, but I think it's an exciting technology and I think it needs to be tested somewhere.
And it doesn't. It doesn't look terrible. I mean, I hate ridge caps. I think they're awful. At least these ridge caps are segmented, which breaks up.
Yeah.
Some of the visual impact that's unpleasant about ridge caps, particularly in the historic district, because it's just not really appropriate in the historic district. You know, the tiles are too big, but it's a new construction and they do sort of mimic in an indirect way a more historic feature and roof closure systems. So I think I agree with you. I think it would be nice to know how this works and I think I think visually it's not terrible. And my concern is in the unknown is that if it doesn't hold up, I don't know about the I'm assuming it's going to meet its requirements for its production of electricity. Looks like a pretty sound piece of material. It'll be interesting to see how it actually holds up 25 years from now, how well it's held up for 30 years and what it looks like. And if it's starting to look bad and not perform well as a roof, it may perform very well as a power generator. But does it perform well as a roof? But I think the only way we'll find that out is to test it.
I think you're exactly right. And this is, again, a good test case, I think. We need to approve something with it so
Is there
that.
any hesitation on the shed?
Yeah, I think, definitely given it's made a conclusion earlier about the distance from the street being a consideration. I think that's also a consideration here. Also, the fact that it is a new structure. I'm fine with that. Now, one thing at the last application, I know that the shed and this masonry building are joined. However, I was kind of mentioning to separate those components to help you out with the shed last time. But I believe there was a fairly strong opinion about the roofing of the shed, that metal roofing.
I would like to know
It was an
what else thinks about that.
I'll tell you what I think. I think that what we were talking about was an after the fact approval. There were pieces of the metal roof that were brought in and we said, okay, you can go back with the metal roof. I think that's what the shed gets based on our discussion last time. However, I think the masonry building, which I consider to be the new building, because we're talking about the shed was kind of we agreed to call it a reclamation of the form that was there kind of thing. I think the new building would be the place, the masonry building would be the place for the application of the testifies. Given our deliberations last week and how we sort of partitioned out the project. That's just my.
I was not here for that discussion.
I do have a copy of that motion if you would like to hear it.
Sure.
The motion was an approval for after the fact with board conditions. And one of those conditions was that the roof was to be hand crimp standing seam painted timbers red.
Okay. So I think we stick to our previous motion. That would be my conclusion. Again, it's up for discussion, but believe that the Tesla tiles, give them a go on the new building, masonry building.
Yeah, that's.
Can I ask the Tesla expert, what the reduction would be of just the hip roof versus both? I'm just curious, do you have that broken down?
Without actually running it, I mean, I can't just,
25.
spitball it, but it's substantially less.
Thank you.
I'm struggling, but I am willing to go back on the board condition from last time, only because the Tesla tiles have been presented to us. Again, I think if we're going to approve this somewhere on the peninsula, this seems like a good location to do it, and I don't see a reason not to approve it on the shed roof, other than, yes, it was an after the fact.
Was that? Basically rewarding an application. I think that's why we were so adamant about the
Mhm.
conditions of that at the last motion. I'm not trying to be difficult about it, but I thought that's fairly cut and dry, even to the point of what color it should be.
I agree with Bill. And like we've talked about, the tiles going on a new building, that's a new build. I mean, we're talking about what's would be left of this of a historic building.
Well, my question, would we have approved
It is appropriately demolished.
Yes.
It would be a.
if these had been presented at the last meeting, would we have approved the Tesla tile?
That's that condition, so
That's
that
what-
means we have to say, would we have approved?
Would we have approved
Based on the
these?
original construction.
Yes, so that's my question. Would we have approved these
Yeah.
on the
I
original
don't think we can
construction?
remove the fact that we reviewed and approved an after the fact. demolition
essentially
condition for the
reopening it.
Shed. By default, we have a step in between, but I don't think we can
Mhm.
override that step in between to say Tesla tiles would be appropriate. Because we just said it's an after the fact approval. We concluded that the reconstruction of the shed was close enough, of a good enough quality, and the materials proposed were akin to the original, that we could support that after the fact. And so we made that motion in light of the original structure and the carryovers from the original structure, the material continuity, form, whatever else. You see what I'm saying?
Would be reopening something that we
Yeah,
already
so
approved, which is not on the
then-
table.
Then you would be saying, well, if someone came in with an original shed with an original turn metal roof that was in bad shape and said, can we put Tesla tiles on that? What would you have said there? See, that's what I'm trying to keep it,
No, you're,
I'm trying to
I-
keep it consistent. What we deliberated last time, and where we stand.
and I'm trying to figure out a way how we wouldn't set precedent by approving this.
I think we say it's a new construction. The masonry building, 100% new construction, designed, handsome building.
Oh, I agree on the new construction. I was,
Would that need to be like a separate application if they wanted to come back and ask for reconsideration? Yeah, right.
yeah, I think so.
Um,
It would be a removal of the roof.
Just getting down to the point of what kind of roof it is, and even Bill's point of saying, okay, and it's tenors red. Because there were little fragments of tenors red on those metal
Yeah.
pieces that got in, you know. That's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to be consistent with
is that a
the
motion?
flow we were on. Yeah, I mean, I can make a motion. Yeah, I'll make a motion, sure. I'll make a motion, based on staff's confirmation of the limited visibility of the proposed stair. I'll make a motion for approval of the reorientation of the proposed stair. And also I'll make a motion for approval of use of the Tesla tiles on the masonry building. New
Yeah,
construction.
Final, because Andrew was saying he was hoping it could be final without having to
Final
go back in the
approval.
queue
Yeah, final approval.
with that one condition. That the Tesla is not. Or the shed, right?
Right, I said for the masonry building.
So this is what I have. Final approval of the reorientation of the proposed stair and use of the Tesla tiles on the new masonry construction.
Correct.
If I could just clarify, that is what the drawings show. The final drawings do show the Tesla just on the masonry and the metal on the shed. So if we could just get final approval of the construction drawings, period, I think that's the simplest way to do it.
I think that's kind of
I think that's what
That's-
you've got.
Okay.
harmonious with the motion, I think.
I mean, we approved everything else last time except the orientation of the stair pending staff verification and then the
We
Tesla.
wanted to see Tesla tiles, and so now we've.
I'll second that.
approved those. Okay, thank you, Julia. Put the motion to a vote. Bill Moore,
Yeah.
Bill Turner,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey,
Yeah,
Julia.
In favor.
Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, agenda item 10, 26 B Street has been deferred by staff. We're on agenda item 11, 93 Church Street.
Oh, can we ask a question? Can staff ask a question about the tiles? Could you send staff a brochure on the tiles for us to have for our?
Do I have staff segment?
Oh.
Would you want a sample?
Or a
maybe?
sample
I think
tile?
that little
Is that
one would be
available?
nice.
Need this.
Yeah, that'd be good
Perfect.
for a
Got
sample.
like
And
50,000 of them.
here, you have this one too. This one,
Whoa.
to me was.
Weird.
And I told you not to break.
This is actually.
I was wondering why that one was a little beat up.
What happened?
Something in
What
transit.
happened to this tile? Was it in a hailstorm or did they just do it?
Got beat with a 2 before.
Oh, they did it on
Yeah,
purpose.
so,
They beat on it.
this is what happened, is beat.
That's okay.
It's more asphalty.
If one of our roofs in Connecticut get hit by a hailstorm and only the metal was damaged. All of my glass is really intact.
Cool.
Thank you.
Jordan style. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Okay, agenda item 11, 93 Church Street. Frankie, if you give us an introduction overview, please.
Yeah, 93 Church Street is not surveyed in Charlestown circa 1910 in the Golden Historic District. They are requesting conceptual through final approval for restoration of historic front porches. This is the property's location on Church Street. Existing site photos. Some context of Church Street. And sandboard maps showing the history of the property before it lost its purchase. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Hi, everybody, good evening. Eddie Favor with the Favor Architects representing Caroline and John Chakiris, the owners of 93 Church Street. And these have a real old school. Very nice application. We're just doing a simple, stuff that's generation. But it's a great house, a great neighborhood. My parents lived next door for years and we've worked on each of these in the row here. Chakiris would like to restore the porch that was lost after Hurricane Gracie, or to Hurricane Gracie, and the 1956 survey we found showed what was there originally. We had precedent with the middle photo up top, which was 97 Church, which was one house over, where we restored and rebuilt that porch maybe 10 or 15 years ago, so I had a good reference point. We went to zoning board to get a variance because we needed a setback variance. Because it sits just inside the setback against the driveway at 95 Church Street. That's the proposed plan. The existing with the non-original stoop, the original French doors are still on the front of the building. Piazza would be restored just as it had been there originally. It's a two-level piazza. It's been proposed. Similarly from the opposite side of the street on the south elevation and the north elevation. It does have an easement on it with the Historic Charleston Foundation. They were supportive, as were neighbors and friends in the immediate vicinity. So happy to answer any questions, but appreciate your support.
Any questions?
Eddie, you borrowed your detailing cues from adjacent properties, or was there some documentation in HCS file that you were able to use as well?
No, we just did it from adjacent properties. Each of them have had it. They kind of, they hopscotch each other. Bill, let's see, 93 had the double piazzas. Maybe that photo can show that. 95 has just a single level porch with a side piazza. 97 had the double piazzas, which is the middle photo up top. And then I guess that's 100 Church Street, or 99 as the other. So when we redid 97, there was historic material there that we were able to use and just use that as reference for what we're doing here in addition to the footprint.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Anyone speaking?
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation, HCF has an easement on this property, and we have reviewed the application with the applicant, and it conforms to the requirements of our easement, and we are in support of this application, and we respectfully recommend approval. Thank you.
Laurel Fay with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society is pleased to offer support of this porch restoration based on historical evidence and neighboring sister house precedents, and we look forward to seeing this project take shape. Thank you.
Is there anyone else speaking? All right, Frank, if you'll give us any staff comments and recommendations, please.
Okay, staff appreciate the return of and the detailing of the porches to this historic structure, and staff recommendation is final approval.
Eddie, did you want to respond to anything raised in the? All right, public comment to the applicant's presentation is not closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
With it, I make a motion for final approval, if y'all are good with it.
Sounds good to me. All right, so we have a motion for final approval. Second by Julia, put the motion to a vote. Fillmore,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Turner,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey,
Yeah, in favor.
Julia. Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank
It
you.
wasn't as sophisticated as the last one was. It was a lot quicker.
I couldn't back it as, so that's well.
Okay,
Thank you.
agenda item 12, 131 Church Street. Frankie, if you'll give us an introduction and overview of the project, please.
131 Church Street is a category 2 in the French Quarter, circa 1809 in the Old Historic District. They're requesting conceptual through final approval for alterations to entry gates, new hanging lanterns, outdoor fireplace, and hardscape alterations. This is the property's location on Church Street. Existing site. Context of Church Street. The architecture inventory photo. And Sanborn map showing the history of the project. I will turn it over to the applicants.
Good evening, I'm Brian McGee with McGee Ratcliffe Construction. I'll be presenting on behalf of the Gilbertsons for the project. As stated, it's exterior improvements mostly to the courtyard area. It's the main gates that lead to their entryway that are rotten and need repair. They're proposing to go back with wood gates made locally by NW Millworks. The same with the pedestrian gate. If you walk there today and saw kind of back in the courtyard, it takes them to the rear courtyard. Part of the scope would involve an iron arch that goes over those gates, and that's where the gas lantern would hang.
I'll look there for you.
Thanks. The hardscape modifications that they're talking about, so that's the archway that would go over the main front gate, and that's the detailing of the gates that are being proposed for the front. The smaller gate to the right is set back past their main entrance to the door. That takes you to the rear courtyard area. Part of the other scope would be taking up a lot of the brick pavers that are there that have become unsteady over the years due to roots growing in them, salvaging, relaying it because there's trip hazards going through the courtyard area currently. In addition, when you walk in to the far right, they'd like to put a little grilling area. There's a grill currently sitting by the bay window, and it's going to be over in the courtyard. And then on the side courtyard that you see that's over near the garage entrance that's off of Chalmers is building an outdoor fireplace. None of the changes proposed are going to interrupt any historic elements of the structure. Everything being proposed can be reversed without damage to any historic elements to the structure. And the visibility is extremely limited for the chimney. If we go, I think there might be some photos that you can see kind of a study of that. Let's see here. It's kind of drawn in a Sharpie, so it's a little hard to see, but that's from Chalmers right there. It's also proposed to put fig ivy on the chimney to kind of make it go away and look like it's part of that structure, so it kind of blended in with the landscape there. The product, the house is does have an historic easement with this from Charleston Foundation, and they've approved the project that's being proposed.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, one, the gate detail shows the iron arch coming off the gate. Is it actually intended to come off of the columns?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it'd come off the columns.
Okay.
Yeah. That details. It'd be supported by the brick column out of that.
Gotcha, okay.
Detail.
I'd ask you the same question, and I just ask, Ava, did you have any historic images to use as precedent, or did you have anything that for the design of the gates? Or
I wasn't privy to it. I think that they were just looking at the neighboring properties and trying to come up with something that referred back to something. Close by.
Thank you.
It'll all be constructed with wood similar and been painted to match colors.
You said those existing gates are in pretty rough shape.
The main entry gates are, they're pretty rough. They're not historic as well.
Yeah, they're not. I didn't think they were. Can you tell how old they are? Just.
I don't know how old they are.
Close to you, maybe?
Yeah, the eighties for sure. Eighties or early nineties would be my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just falling apart.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one simple one. On the gates, the shop drawings, they don't show the two round circles. What are the two round circles on the gates? In the center.
Those are knobs.
Okay.
You applied hardware pieces.
Gotcha. Okay.
Not, the lantern is like a Carolina lanterns model,
Yes, yeah,
and it's
there's
the small one.
And it's gas, right? Just
Yes.
confirming. You have any idea of the supporting arch, the dimensions? Is that
So the
tube or what is that?
believe it's flat stock.
It's plastic.
You might be able to address that more, the archway going over the gate. Is that a flat stock? It's a tube.
It's tube. So made a comment about a pelican sitting on one. It looked like it might bend it. This one looks pretty sturdy. That lantern's probably pretty heavy too. So
Yeah, I'm sure.
throwing that out. Yeah. Tube sounds right.
Thank you. Do we have anyone speaking?
April Wood, Historic Tourism Foundation, we've worked with, we have an easement on this property and we've worked with it and have reviewed the application to confirm that the proposal conforms to the requirements of the easement. And we support the application and respectfully recommend approval. Thank you.
Anyone else speaking? Okay, Frankie, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
One question, I'm sorry.
Yes.
The lantern, the cut sheet shows like a half yoke, but you're not really doing that, right? It's just gonna hang right off the arch.
Yeah,
Okay,
it would hang off the archway.
thank you, sorry.
Okay, staff had a recommendation to reduce the size of the lantern at the streetscape gates. Reducing overall dimensions by approximately 25% seems more appropriate to the size of the opening between buildings. Staff recommendation is final approval without condition.
Thank you, Frankie. Did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments?
Well, the only thing that, 10%, but we probably can, that street's really dark. And if there is any emergency needed, it would be nice to have that light to see the address. So I'm thinking that that size is adequate for lighting of the entry into that place. Plus, it's also used as a drive, like a golf cart, and people will park in front of that driveway. So if they see that there's a gate and a driveway, maybe they wouldn't be parking there, during that time period. But that's the recommended size for that area based from Carolina.
Thank you. All right, public comment in the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and the vote.
Can you flip it back to that, elevation with the light? I think that might be the main topic of discussion. Gotcha. Right there.
And I will, for the board's information provided, that the comment was, it was BD's comment. She just thought that the size of the lantern made the gate feel small and that the gate is not a small gate. So she was concerned about the proportions.
The arch is gonna also get wider if it comes off of the piers, so that might help a little bit.
Lifts
as
it up a
well.
little bit further.
So the arch will have to grow in width than what we're seeing.
It's all handsome. I really don't have any issue with it. Really including the lantern size. I know that's the smallest one, I think, that Carolina Lanterns offers without going full on custom, but I think it's appropriate.
So, and then so little of the hardscape is going to be visible to me. That's kind of a non-issue.
When I've seen these before, the lantern always looks bigger in the pictures, and then when it's installed, it doesn't look as large, which is why I'm inclined to. If this is what the
It's,
company had.
it's glass all sides,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. That's probably why.
Yeah.
It's more transparent looking.
It's not gonna look that big when it's installed. Typically when
Yeah, that's a really good point about engaging the columns, therefore the supporting will be a little bit spread, which will be a little bit larger. I would tell the owner, it'll throw out some light, but not much. It's gas, so it's, I don't know. Yeah, it'll help,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, it's not gonna be like this bright beacon, but it'll still be nice. Yeah, I think it's size wise. I mean, I could see where. I don't think 25% reduction, and since it's close, I think it's fine.
Like
I
so,
take on it.
I do think that they need to get with staff on the details on how the hoop's gonna engage the columns. and all that.
Yeah, because they're gonna have to be anchored in.
Yeah.
Or maybe ask Ryan if he's considered that, how to do that. You wanna find out? Ask him now or?
Yeah, do you have an idea how you're gonna, tie the
Anchor
hoop
into the masonry
into
columns.
the masonry columns?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna have to be anchored in, with a fastener, into the masonry.
But
To be helpful.
might you have something that you anchor into the column and it sleeves over?
Sleeves over that possibly,
Okay.
yeah.
So you'll be coming straight out of the top of them.
Out the top of the column, that's
Yeah,
correct.
okay.
All right, so I'm going to, are you good?
I mean,
Make a motion for preliminary approval. With final review by staff. And that could clarify the connection.
We can do that as a permit.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for preliminary approval with final review by staff. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Sheila, put the motion to a vote. Mark,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey,
Yeah, in favor.
Julia,
Yay in favor.
Bill Turner.
Yeah, favor.
Your vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, agenda item 1310 Gillen Street. Frankie, could you give us an introduction overview, please?
San Gillen is a category 2 in the French Quarter, circa 1820 in the Old Historic District. They are requesting conceptual approval, final approval to replace front and secondary entry door and transom, add shutters to the second and third floor windows, and place door. This is the property's location on Gillen Street. Some context of Gillen, I could not get a street view to look at the building, sorry. But I do have the architecture inventory. This is the architecture inventory. photo. And Sanborn maps showing the history of the property. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Well, thank you. I'm Patrick Orfis, Darwin Studio. Just want to touch on a couple of things. A lot of these changes are fairly small and fairly minimal, but it is category 2 buildings. We want to make sure that everything's getting reviewed. So from the front facade, you're going to see most of the changes that we're proposing here. And the front doors, right at the entry, it's pretty obvious that they're not historic to the original building. You go out there, it'll look like somebody at some point had a couple of doors lying around. I think one's a 32-inch leaf, one's a 28-inch leaf. Jams are just out of scale. They got some transoms to fit. Just doesn't seem to make sense. Doesn't seem to make sense for the building. It's the only non-symmetrical part of the So we just want to replace those with more code compliant doors, 36-inch leaves and a 6-foot wide opening. Add a transom that seems to make sense, realign some of that symmetry, but actually keep the same look. So have it some glass, some transparency, keep the brightness on that first floor. We're also changing out the lanterns. The proposed lanterns are a little bit slimmer, still gas powered, but they fit in that space between the shutters and the door a little bit better than the current ones there. I can't speak to how old the current ones are, just throwing that out there. And then we're proposing shutters at the second and third level as well. There's definitely evidence out there that there were shutters on this building at some point. A couple of the old shutter dogs are still there, a little like pinwheel style things you can barely see. We're proposing just to do the S-shaped shutter dogs all the way up with solid shutters to match what's already there on that first floor. Sometimes typically we do the louvered on the second and third floor directly adjacent to this building. I think it's 12 Gillen has that same solid on the first floor, solid on the second floor going up. I think there might even be another building with the same style kind of right on that block as you're looking around. So we were kind of, instead of going with the typical Charleston thing is, we were going more of what seemed to be typical on that block right now. Just gonna skip one ahead. We are also proposing a change at the side door. So this whole section back here, as best we can tell, was built in the 80s. The construction of it is like pressure treated wood. It's an ephes style stucco. I can't tell if it's like this, but it's just like a thin coat on top of something and just doesn't seem to make sense. So from the facade perspective, like this trim, these cornice, the dentals on both this door, even that little piece of trim above on the header of the window, they're just coated ephes type of stucco something. So this too. So there's really nothing historic about it. The slab here on the second floor is concrete and rebar. It's not 1880s. It's not part of the original historic structure. So what we're proposing is just to open that up. And we have our little hobbit door. Yeah, so this little section, the brick facade where the hobbit door is 18 feet back from the front facade. The upper level is actually about 23 feet back. So it's set back there unless you're standing basically directly in front of it. You can't see it. But the hobbit door right now is actually missing about 8 inches on the bottom of it. So everything's just kind of getting inside. So we want to close it off, but we'd like to close it off with a little bit more glass because that's a kind of dark alley, dark space on the inside of that. So bring some light into that. And so we've got the historic looking steel doors with glass. They are impact rated. And then similar on the second floor, kind of a larger set of doors to bring with some impact rated glass and bringing that light in there. Until recently, this door was actually blocked off from the inside. It was still there. It's got a storm door on it right now. You can't see through. I think the window was even partially blocked before the interior demolition started. So we're really just focusing some of those bigger changes on the non-historic side of it, but on the historic building itself, kind of minor things just to bring it up and dress it up a little bit. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant?
Couple. Just the front door, I was curious what the thought was behind that particular design for the replacement front entry doors that kind of look like what you have there now.
We didn't want to do anything too far from what was already there. We wanted to kind of simplify the process a little bit. And right now it's got the full glass doors. It's not a dark space, but it is a deep space on the inside. So the more glass that we can have right there, the better. And since we already had that on the front, we wanted to mimic that and kind of keep that style.
And then I think maybe it was in some elevation. It looks like, is the ironwork changing? Not that that's a huge deal. I'm just curious. It looks like, okay.
So you're talking about the ironwork kind of at the
Yeah.
entry here. No, none of that's being touched. Nothing at the street level being touched.
That's all I got. Oh, I have a question for staff. This new thing about requesting conceptual preliminary final, what is that? What does that mean?
So it was a sort of a compromise of our director. When we have applicants that are requesting a final approval, apparently there is a legal issue if we advertise this. If we don't advertise conceptual and go through the steps that our ordinance mark out for conceptual, preliminary, and final.
Okay.
So on the ones that are requesting a final approval, we are advertising them as all steps. And then that way, if you give approval for all steps, there's no legal hiccup.
Okay, thank you.
The new fenestration, first and second floor and the little addition, it's steel frame.
Impact rate.
Any other questions? Thank you. Do we have anyone speaking?
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. We have reviewed the application to replace the front and second door entry door and transom shutters and replace the doors at 10 Gillen. And we thank the applicant for their time reviewing the project with us. We are supportive of this project overall, and we just have a couple of minor tweaks to suggest. One, we suggest that the upper shutters are louvered rather than panel. We also suggest that the applicant consider a shutter dog that is not an S, as that's a more contemporary style than the date of the building. The second point was at the recessed courtyard second floor, we suggest that a mullion or separation is added between the door at the top of the stairs and the adjacent windows so that the second floor openings are centered over the first floor door and stairs. We also suggest that this portion of the building should be painted a dark color to ensure that it appears more like a background for the building. We respectfully recommend approval of this application.
Is there anyone else speaking? All right, Frankie, if you give us any staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff just had an observation that while louver shutters are typical for the typical above the ground floor, staff appreciated the simplicity of the panel shutters on this particular facade. And while already noted to be operable, include information on the selected shutter hardware for next review. Staff appreciate the openness of the proposed fenestration alterations, which is reminiscent of the historic condition. Also, replacement of the front entry and second floor exterior doors to not cause concern. Staff recommendation was conceptual approval with final review by staff of permanent documents.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Orpus, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments?
No, I think well said.
All right, public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
think it's all well done. We do typically ask for louvered shutters up top, you know. That's not a huge deal for me, but. And I think you mentioned that there might be the propeller dogs on the building now, maybe just stick with the propellers instead of the S shape. But other than that, I think it's all great.
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of really good stuff going on here. And, you know, I might not have a strong opinion about the shutters at the upper floors if there weren't some remaining louvered shutters at the middle of the second floor. So I kind of agree with Stuart Charleston that in this case, it would make more sense to have louvers at the upper floors. And if there is any evidence of older shutter dogs, I think that would be the way to go for sure. I also like the suggestion from April to paint the hyphen dark since it's nothing we really want to celebrate. And I would suggest maybe just reconsidering the front door design. I think it's a good opportunity to do something that would maybe be a little more like what might have been there originally rather than replicating kind of what's there now. That's all I've got.
I agree. I think that's kind of an interesting point you made, Julie, about the front door. I've always taken this part of the street to be, obviously, I'm sure there are plenty of residential components, but there's probably a strong mercantile, maybe even maritime type historically component to that. So, yeah, I mean, I can't see the point about that. Would that warrant potentially having that as a condition? You'd see.
Everything. They go by there and that front door is not.
They're two different sizes.
Going by the thing there. I think it's really an improvement. I agree with Julia. You know, maybe thinking about something a little more. That front entry.
It's a really cool opportunity, you know, to study precedents and come up with something. Lindsay, did you have anything? No. All right, I will make a motion for, let's call it preliminary approval. With a few board conditions. One, to use louvered shutters on the upper floors. Two, to adopt the propeller shutter dogs. Three, to restudy the proposed design of the front entry door. And four, to paint the hyphen in a dark recessive color.
The front doors, you just mean the doors themselves or the door that's surrounded?
Just
The doors themselves.
I guess opening and the transom, whatever.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for preliminary approval. You said final review by staff. All right, we have a motion on the floor for preliminary approval with a few board comments. One, to use louvered shutters on the upper floors. Two, to adopt the propeller shutter dogs. Three, to restudy the front door design. And four, to paint
The hyphen.
a dark recessive color. And final review by staff. All right, do I have a second to Julia's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Phil. A motion to a vote. Fillmore,
Yeah, in favor.
Phil Turner,
Yeah, in favor.
Julia,
Yeah, in favor.
Phil Hughes.
Yeah, in favor.
Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, Julia, you're out.
Well,
Yes. You don't have to wait. You just can't say anything. All right, agenda item 14 is 59 Smith Street. Frankie, could you give us an introduction, overview of the project, please?
59.
Julia, you actually don't need to, I mean, you need to come back. You're out 14 and 15. Okay, we have a quorum, so. Okay, I apologize. Go ahead.
It's 6:30. It feels real low. Don't get used to it. Yes.
Nice.
59 Smith Street is a category 3 in Charleston Village circa 1818 in the Old Historic District, requesting conceptual approval for a new rear addition and new rear ADU. This is property's location on Smith Street. Some existing site photos. Existing site photo showing the dependency at the rear. I think that was from the previous presentation. Architecture inventory from 1973. More historic images. And some context of Smith Street. And we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Neil Stevenson, architect of this project. I'd like to see if I could invite John Poston up as well to speak to you about some of the history of the project, just a brief history because it's a lot going on. It's an old house.
Absolutely, you've got 10 minutes, so
Okay.
use them however you would like.
Sure.
When Neil and Casey Bearish and Melissa Linton asked me to look at this property, I was already familiar with it because we included it in the buildings of Charleston in the 1990s. But I was intrigued by how much more history the property had than I had previously realized, but also how relatively untouched it was architecturally, both on the exterior and interior, despite all sorts of things that had happened to the property, particularly in the 20th century. And the house was built, of course, in 1818 by an Edisto Island planner as a town residence. He passed it to a cousin, and then in 1838, it became the residence of a Scottish merchant and banker named William Burney. And we are now calling it the Jenkins Burney House because the Burneys had it for a fairly long period of time, from about 1838 to 1891. In 1891, it became the house of a family named Shepherd that owned Carolina Rice Company. And during that whole period, it only was in the hands of 3 families and very well lived in, but not much altered. I think there was some gas lighting probably at one point. The wonderful facets of the house include the interior chimney pieces and chimneys, fireplaces, fairly untouched, as well as a lot of the woodwork. And it was because of all this before that it was restored, but it was restored after a period of somewhat deterioration between 1934 and 1964. And in that period, it was cut into apartments, and the original staircase was removed and a staircase was added to the piazza, as happened with many Charleston houses in that early 20th century period. And then the piazza staircase was accessed the upper units. And unfortunately, with the loss of the original staircase, that seemed to be a sort of signaling the building going into decline, but it really didn't, because even that family maintained it well. And the Historic American Building Survey
photograph the interior in 1940, it was one of a handful of buildings they chose to photograph. And Samuel Stoney himself thought this was one of the great federal houses of Charleston. And it was in 1964 that Elizabeth Gadsden Woodward, who with her husband Charles were responsible for the restoration of many houses above Calhoun Street at the very beginning of the rehabilitation of Charleston above Calhoun Street. And their efforts with Francis Edmonds and the foundation led directly to the expansion of the historic district in the Charleston Village and Anson Borough in 1977. So this house has a significant history, both from its original history, but also from the preservation side, and also keenly important to the current owner and to Neil and to the architectural effort is preserving some aspects of what happened with the house's restoration in 1964 with the excellent work by Herbert DaCosta and his craftsmen who were among an early generation of craftsmen now lost to us in various trades, and especially the work of Philip Simmons, because we suspected and we finally found the documentation that Philip Simmons did ironwork for the rehabilitation of the back part of the building. The Woodwards turned it into a rental house of 1 unit with 1 unit in the kitchen building, taking it back from the 6 units it had become. And it's continued in its present state. It was owned by pretty much one owner after the Woodwards, one owner only after the Woodwards, before Melissa was able to get it. And the important thing about the house is, as someone said to us the other day, it's just such a treasure of Charleston architecture. And I've been very gratified to get to work on it. And I'm very gratified too to say that I think it's going to be a good rehabilitation.
Thank you. And I think that was an important, one of the important points here is that this house is, it's very beautifully detailed and beautifully preserved over the years. But one of the issues, and I think that a lot of the neighbors have issues of us adding too much to it, is that the house is now going to be lived in by a family. One of the main goals of this house is that the owner and her mother are going to be living here with the sister and the nephew, and it's going to become more of a compound for the family. But the mother is at a point now where she is going to be confined to a wheelchair, and they really need to have elevator access to the first and second floor. We're not going to the attic. But that's an important component. And I think the last time you saw this project, I think we were maybe too aggressive with how the addition, which is what houses the kitchen and the master bathroom and some of the plumbing and some of the more intrusive things that we definitely would not want to include in the main historical house, which is being very beautifully restored. They're carefully removing all of the paint down to bare wood so that they can come back and really restore it back to its original beauty. So the addition, we're trying to be as minimal as possible, but there's still a lot of space that has to be added just to create a livable situation, because this is not a museum. It is definitely a family residence that's being renovated here. Just to touch upon a few zoning points, which I keep hearing, is that currently the lot occupancy is at 18.5%. The allowable lot occupancy is 50%, and we are proposing to occupy 39%, and that's including the swimming pool. So there is still over 60% of occupancy of the lot, which would be left for green space. And I know that's a zoning issue, but I keep hearing that complaint. And so I just thought I would touch on that. Another thing is that this, there's been some concern about this being a short-term rentals or whatever. This is definitely, the intention is for this to be a family dwelling. There are in the entire, the main house is 4 bedrooms, 4.5 baths. The kitchen house, which is where the sister is going to live, it has 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. And in the guest house or carriage house, which is really, there's going to be 2 bedrooms and 2.5 baths. So since the last proposal, we've listened to everything that you all had to say, and we've been listening to the neighbors too, trying to reduce this as much as possible. We went from the addition being solidly connected to the main house, which lost some of the details of the wraparound porch in the rear. And in this, sorry. In this presentation, in this design, you can see that we connected the house on the first floor porch, where the porch is infilled currently. That remains. We're removing as little of the original fabric as possible, and then retaining the design and fabric of the wraparound porch as much as possible, but while still allowing for the connection of the elevator, which is crucially important to access the upper floors. Also, we dropped the height of the addition. The main floors need to be accessed just as to be accessible by wheelchair. So first and second floor are already tall because they're 11-foot ceilings in the main house. And the main house, existing historical main house has 11-foot ceilings on the second floor, but we're reducing our ceiling heights to reduce the massing of the addition to 9.5 feet, and then pulling back reducing the connection to the house, and I'll show you where we're doing that on the second floor, so that so you can see on the second floor and below, we've actually allowed that porch to wrap all the way around. And then we took the advice of the board from last time of using maybe the L shape of the structure to allow us to reduce that connection and then put some of the functions that we were looking at into the addition as shown, which I think is a positive design element. You can also see that we have, as the property goes to from front to rear, we've also on the bottom pose, you can see how we've enforced the hierarchy of the existing house to the addition, the kitchen house, and then we've greatly reduced the carriage house. And the carriage house, really the main function of the carriage house, they wanted to have a guest house, but also they have some vintage cars, and they wanted to have those, which I think is important because some people were saying, well, you don't really need to have parking underneath, but it really does for this family. They do want that is a very important requirement.
Neil, you've got about a minute left.
Okay. So we are, I think I've covered most of the issues that the board, and I'm open for, please ask questions.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, Neil, on the addition to the main house, I'm seeing a parapet around the top. Is that solid parapet or is it?
So there's a solid parapet. We dropped it down as far as we can, and all those mechanical units that are on the ground now are going to be put up there. And so there's about a 30-inch parapet, and then a glass rail around without a cap. So that it's, you get your 3 foot of railing up there.
So where does I'm not really reading where the glass is that
It's there, you can see a fine line above the cornice.
yeah, can you just, maybe we should point it out on this.
Yeah, sure. So this cornice here, so this here is glass.
That's the glass.
Yeah, and then this is solid.
Gotcha.
Drop down. We simplified the connection here.
Okay.
And then this cornice drops below the main house.
Gotcha.
And then this is glass, and then the mechanical units are sitting just behind that cornice.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone speaking? It's public comment. Is there anyone speaking as a member of the public? Yep.
You plan to read the letters that were sent?
They were provided to the board before. We've all reviewed them, so.
One of several people. I'm Tom Steele. I live just south of Ms. Linton's house. Sort of feeling kind of bad about opposing a neighbor, but I think listening to the presentation of the historic house, it strikes me as how incongruous these two things are. Ms. Linton is doing an absolutely beautiful, meticulous restoration of this really historic house. And we sort of thought, well, we've had many months of noise, including weekends, loss of a large oak, but that's sort of a price to pay for the restoration, and really a meticulous restoration outside and in of the main house. But then these modern additions, they're all 3-story, even though they're persistently described as 2-story. They would dominate what is our view now of a very nice, large old house, the kitchen house, and a very large grassy area. And even though I guess it's just less than 50% of the area, it looks huge. And one of our concerns that the original request the last time it came before the board was for 13 parking spaces, which has now been reduced. But I think one of our concerns is that even though Ms. Linton would plan to have her family there and perhaps some long-term rentals, they've also applied to be on the historic register, which would open the possibility of short-term rentals. And if at some point she and her family were to move, then it feels like we would be living next door to a very large motel with a swimming pool, which could be the fate of the next owner's use of the property for short-term rentals. So it just seems like a huge, visually overwhelming addition to what's there now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele.
My name is John Pope. I live at 109 Bull Street around the corner. Main points, I think it's too large, not in keeping with the neighborhood. The additions, Jonathan spoke so great about how wonderful the historic structure is, but the additions are very suburban. And the main thing in the new proposal, this section comes out all the way to the edge of the piazza, which from the street now blocks the entire view of the dependency, which they can say that they're trying to reduce the hierarchy, but from the street now, it's actually getting larger in this section, and this is coming almost to the setback. So I had asked that you would please deny the proposal. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Fanny Tanela. I live at 38 Montague Street. I've been there for 10 years. The back of my property abuts directly the back of their property. And so this addition will affect me directly. I think conceptually, the design is more reminiscent of suburban architecture rather than the historic Charleston architecture. And you talk beautifully about the renovation of the house, and I agree completely, but then you're gonna have two additions that are going to overwhelm the integrity of this historic property with the main house and the dependents. And then those two new additions are destroying the dependents, like you don't even see it. It's completely absorbed by these two contemporary structure. I saw the deck. I've never seen a deck like that in downtown Charleston. You see piazza, you see porches, you don't see a deck like that. So it's very, I've never seen this before. I also have 3 businesses in historic properties, and we try really hard to keep the integrity of this historic architecture, and it's, for me, it just doesn't make sense. So I'm asking for you to, if you could deny this proposal.
Thank you.
My name is Chris Kellogg. I live at 105 B Gold Street. And I'm just moving into the neighborhood, but longtime resident. Always care about the architecture and historical integrity of these really good houses in Charleston. I know there are a lot of things in the balance, a lot of interest. You know, I hear about how a family is going to use it. I think that's always important. I guess I think many times, you know, livability, usability comes before this board and this pipe in here in the middle. You know, there's a lot to work out. I think you guys are used to doing that. I guess my main issue is with this piece in the back. You know, there's a certain rhythm before you get here, a hierarchy, scales. I feel like there's a real grab for square footage. It's hard to see here, but from the public rights of way on either street on Montague or Smith, I mean, the volumes, the space is filled with things that compete. And I heard the word incongruous before. I'd like to reiterate that it's not in keeping with, you know, the beauty of that area and how these long lots work and how everybody has to look at this massive thing in the back, which doesn't quite read that way here, but you would have a 3-dimensional kind of view, I think it would. So I would ask you to deny this proposal. Thank you.
Is there anyone else speaking?
Laurel Fay with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The PSC stands with the Charleston Village Neighborhood Association in opposition to this request. The board previously denied the proposed height, scale, and mass of this proposal, and the current submittal does not reflect sufficient restudy per the board's direction. In keeping with our previous comments, our fundamental concerns remain. First, the amount of massing shown introduces far too much building intensity to the site and completely overwhelms this early 19th century single house and dependency. While the height has been reduced in some areas, the mass of the addition and ADU have increased with footprints that now extend further into the site's open space, which is an important part of the property's character. Secondly, the addition to the main house still engulfs the form of the historic piazza and should engage more sensitively with a hyphenated connection. And third, both the addition and ADU remain architecturally incompatible with the property and surrounding context. New construction should be complementary and deferential to existing structures, but in this case, the proposal detracts from and even competes with the historic architecture. Given the significance of this property, this proposal would have serious detrimental effects on its character and integrity. This project once again needs a full restudy, and we ask that it be denied as submitted. Thank you.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation, we have many of the same comments that have already been expressed. HCF has reviewed the application for conceptual approval at 59 Smith Street, and we especially appreciate the summary of the house history by John Poston. The proposal has improved since the previous application, but we still think the scale of the new construction needs to be reduced. My comments for the main house: we appreciate that the applicant is retaining the historic features at the north elevation. We are concerned that the rear addition is too large. This large size negatively impacts the historic wraparound portion of the piazza, which is enveloped by the new addition. The wraparound piazza is an important part of the historic character of the house. The importance of this architectural element should not be minimized. The large size of the proposed addition also negatively impacts the historic dependency. The proposed addition will crowd and tower over the existing historic structure. We observe that the garage appears to be driving much of the size of the addition, and we're concerned that this modern element is out of character for the historic property. We recommend eliminating the garage and reducing the footprint of this addition in width and depth. Regarding the dependency, the proposed new dependency is also too close to the historic structure. We advise that the westernmost bay is removed or significantly reduced so that the structure can be pushed toward the rear property line away from the historic dependency. Although we appreciate that the size of the structure has been reduced from the previous application, we believe that the eave height of the proposed dependency should not be higher than the eave height of the historic structure. We also observe that the footprint of the dependency is wider than the main house, inclusive of the porches, and potentially larger than the footprint of the historic dependency. We believe that the width should further be reduced to be subordinate to the historic structures of the site. We recommend deferral of this application to restudy the height, scale, and mass of the project. Thank you.
Is there anyone else speaking from the public? Frankie, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
The proposed uses a hyphen in plan to break down the masses and allow more of the original form to remain articulated. Related to general architectural directions, the proportions of the windows on the new addition complements the original house, but is differentiated in light size, which is preferred in order to eliminate confusion about the building's history. Recess the glass railing from the edges, I think this is for the roof deck, from edges in order to lessen their visual impact. Intersection of the piazza roof, and southward extension of the newly proposed is awkward and appears to need more resolution. For an addition, this is a critical location to understand. Restudy. Massing of the new addition is coplanar with piazza edge, and three-dimensional images would accommodate an understanding of its mass and the intersection with the piazza. For the ADU, the proportions of the windows should be made more vertical. Suggest adding trim to windows and simplifying the roof and form since the building is small, and unifying the elevations. Staff recommendation is deferral for restudy with staff conditions and board comments.
Thank you, Frankie. Neil, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I just would like to just reiterate the fact that we're following the city's ordinance, and as far as the height, scale, mass, and the footprint of the building, we're trying to reduce this as much as possible, but still make it livable. And I think one of the things that we're suffering from is that there's been so little additions and renovations to this building over the years, that it doesn't allow for bathrooms and kitchens in it right now. And I think that if we were to have to reduce this, the size of this, and then incorporate kitchens and bathrooms into the main house, I think that would be a mistake. again, we're following the city's ordinance. There are no zoning issues at all. And I think that we really listened to what everyone said, and we've done our best to reduce the scale of this as much as possible. And that one of the things that we're again suffering from that makes us so tall is that the existing floors in the main house are so tall. And the first and second floor really need to line up in order to make the accessibility work. And then we've dropped the ceiling heights as much as we can in both the ADU or carriage house and in the main house. I mean, we continue to work on that, but we've done everything we can to kind of reduce the massing of it. So as far as the way, but also I think a flat roof we wanted to utilize a flat roof, which may increase the massing of it, but it also it gives us the opportunity to put all the mechanical units up there, which right now are just cluttering on the ground. So it's always a give or take thing. You have to deal with some of these things, but anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you. All right, public comment in the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote.
And this is kind of a case of the program doesn't fit the lot. It's a lot to try to fit on here, and you throw in the fact that there's not a lot of room between the main house and the carriage house to get a workable addition on. And, I think there's a few things that could be done with the addition to the main house that would help. One would be dropping the height of the hyphen. I'm calling the hyphen the portion that lines up with the old rear piazza. If that could be dropped and taken out of the same roof plane as the main body of that addition, I think that would help. I'm wondering how much of the there's I guess there's on the south side of that hyphen, there are two spaces, internal spaces, which are kind of like entry hall spaces. If those could be pushed in more, because they seem fairly generous on the floor plans, that would then narrow that connection down even more between the main house and the and that hyphen as well. I don't like the way the not hyphen, but the addition to the main house comes out farther than the piazzas. Usually we try to keep them farther out. On the kitchen house, I don't have much to say on that, other than the window should probably be more in keeping what was there originally, a double hung window, TDL. The ADU, I agree with historic groups that rear bay of it could come off, and you could gain more separation between the kitchen house and the ADU. I'm not sure what the ceiling heights are in the ADU, but the ADU has gotten considerably better. But I do think the eave height should not be any greater than the kitchen house itself. But like, this was a hard one to fix. And it's because there's just a lot of program for this site.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the biggest points for me that, yes, I'm having a little bit of issue with. The loss of the openness of the end of the piazza as it returns, you know, by fact that the addition is basically almost coplanar with the outboard edge of the piazza. In essence, it's almost reading like closing the piazza.
Yeah.
And the loss of that view is an issue. And I guess another point, maybe to consider, it could be simply, in my mind, simply be maybe the strategic location of the elevator, because it seems like you could have a front and a back door on an elevator. One could unload in the historic house, one could unload into the addition or part, and those floor levels don't necessarily have to be concurrent with each other. I've done homes before with elevators that had, you know, 5 or 6 stops to get out one side at one level and one at the other. You know, and it happens a lot downtown. I've had that happen several times. So potentially a device to reduce the height and impression of the addition to the main house proper might be to create an elevator that pours to both sides. That could potentially reduce the height of that addition substantially, which definitely would be a positive as well. How to handle pulling it back off the edge of the piazza, I don't know the answer program wise, but that would be something I think would be something I would want to see. I had one more thought about that whole scenario back there, and I don't know if it works or not. And granted, you know the building a lot better inside than I know it. But I was thinking about the precedent of additions to historic buildings, the sequential additions of progressing back on the property, sometimes even the linking up. It's very common to link up dependency buildings to the main building via a connection. You know, kitchen houses are linked to main houses all the time. Had you any consideration of potentially even linking up the secondary masonry building via connection to the front building, then the floor levels potentially of that secondary building could be operating off of that level in reduction to the overall height of the front house. In other words, the elevator system could connect with it. So just a thought, because then you could have a progressive development pattern, which is more common to what we see. I'm just throwing that out. This is a question, really. And then, yeah, the dependency, it's definitely gotten a lot better. But I do think it's to some degree aggressive, but I could even say that I could see that happening potentially. I believe April made a really good point potentially about that westernmost bay, you know, potentially displacement of that, and moving that back further, freeing it up from the back of the existing dependency building, but maybe also looking at obviously the eave heights, aligning or maybe subordinate to that, but also the detailing and nature of that building. I know we're just reviewing this conceptually now, but there might be a way through some of the detailing you can create the presence of a little bit more of a delicately refined massing. The building appears wide, the roof appears slightly squat, and I'm sure you're working under height restrictions and all those things. And those are the bane of our existence all the time, because it forces us to do things that proportionally we may not always want to do. So it may need more of an engagement of that upper floor into the roof line. I don't quite know the answer to that. But I was trying to think of potentially devices and ways to ultimately culminate in a vision. A summary of what I would like to see would be more openness to the end of the piazza, more subordination to the height of the addition proper on the back of the house, and then more reduction displacement to the rear of the property of the ADU. You know, diminutive as possible, a compaction of program. I appreciate the multi-generational and the family living in the house like this. I think that's a continuation, it sounds like, of the history of the house as it's been, which is a very positive thing. So I'm hoping there are devices that can help facilitate those issues. And I get the car issue, and if I had cars, I'd want them near me too, if they're classic cars, but I think some of the garaging and effects of the garaging are dictating some of the building placements and or sizes. So I don't want to discount the fact that they're there, but historic Charleston wasn't designed around cars, obviously. So I think we need to, be aware of that fact as well, that, if something generated from vehicular activity is driving placement, proportion, or locations of certain things, I would take that on my consideration of hierarchy of importance as pretty low down on all this. I hate to say that, but I appreciate the fact that I love old cars too. So that would really be my sort of summary of comments. I just threw those things out. They're definitely not things I'm saying that I want to see you do. I was just trying to spitball myself ideas of maybe how some things could be helped and remedied. So that's what I can.
I think most of the points have been made. I am generally in alignment with HCF and preservation and their critique of it. I think the addition is overwhelming the historic structure. It's tall relative to it. Its mass is great relative to it. The architectural direction has improved some, but I think it has a significant way to go. I think part of it is, several people have mentioned, is being driven by cars. And I think that should sort of be taken as much as possible out of the equation. It's nice that the hyphen has been recessed back and more of the original small addition is evident and the porch roof turns back, but the addition now extends in the wide part out to the outside edge of the porch, and I think that's inappropriate. I think it crowds the historic kitchen building badly. Bill made some good points about perhaps you could reduce the mass of that and in some other way create a more appropriate elevator access. Try to get into that. The ADU has improved, I think, in architectural direction. It has come down in size, which is positive. I think it is just barely subordinate to the historic kitchen building, and it needs to be more subordinate. And in its current orientation, it extends past the plane of the porches of the historic house. I think that's inappropriate. I think most of what has been stated here, I agree with.
Say of that discussion about the ADU, and I appreciate that. Again, potentially the location of the ADU may be adjustable because of that last bay. Yeah,
I think if you manage to pull the addition back so that it becomes more subordinate and more appropriate, the width of that ADU is going to become more prominent. And so I think those two things need to work together in some way. Because I think it's correct one and not the other is probably not going to solve a lot of the problem. I agree. That's anything else to add?
I don't think I was here for the original application, but the positive is it does look like it is moving in the right direction from what I understand the board's comments to be and what typically our comments are. I think Bill Huey, you raised just threw out some good ideas for how this could be further reduced. But I don't have anything to add.
I would like to point out that, I mean, they're doing some wonderful things with the main house, and I'm very appreciative of that. And also the carriage house. It's just the new construction components which need to be massaged.
Well, maybe because they're doing something so great with the main house, that it's really important to get this. The addition and the ADU, right?
But I also want to say it has made a good bit of progress from the first time we saw it. So,
I think particularly the architectural direction is improved.
yes, yeah, definitely.
Landscape mass.
Right.
And I guess because of that, that's why staff's made a recommendation for deferral. We're still in conceptual, so that would be due to high school now.
Are you thinking of making a motion? Will you?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, really sort of ask the board because I want to try to get all commentary, more comments that are going to be more helpful for Neil going forward. I believe some of the folks in the public made some comments, and I remember Laurel April made a comment about do you have any thoughts on the architectural direction of I would say primarily the proposed addition? Obviously, it's saying that it's not, it's differentiated from the historic structure, but is it congruous enough? To the historic structure?
I mean,
ask that question.
There is, I'm not gonna try to pinpoint it. I think the comment suburban is probably
Yeah.
at least somewhat appropriate. I'm not sure about the finishes, the way it's drawn. It does look suburban. Certainly the garage door doesn't help it at all. Even though that may not be particularly visible from the right of way. I think that it's certainly differentiated. I think it's not terribly compatible. I'm not an architect. I'm not going to try to design it. I'll leave that to you guys.
Yeah.
But I do think it needs to in some way relate more effectively to the architecture of a historic house.
I think this is the case where simple is best.
I got that feeling too, because the feeling I got was, and I might be totally wrong, I'm not trying to read your mind or anything, but the idea of definitely differentiating the addition is first and foremost there. But I think it's because of the massing of the addition, it made that differentiation effort even more. It's almost like you double down on it to try to make it, read separately. So I think with potentially the subordination of the elements, it could ease off on that a little.
Yeah.
I guess is what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay. And I think your comments about working with the design of an elevator I think those are spot on, being able to bring that height of that
levels
addition. Yeah.
So it looks like we're sitting on, let's see, okay.
And this may be one, I don't know if you want to have actual conditions or the commentary was enough.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping the commentary was not, because there was a theme to it, I guess I would say.
Right, and I don't think any of those were really conditions, or I didn't get the
Yeah,
impression,
no,
it's more of a
no,
general. It actually
Still
just-
enough, there's a lot of interpretation that still needs to be made, and Neil needs to have the chance to do those things. I was simply just throwing out things I might look at first. If I was in your position, I would go back and maybe look at these things. That's the laundry list I kind of gave there. So I'll just go just generally and just say I'll make a motion for deferral for restudy.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for deferral for restudy. Do I have a second to Bill's motion?
I'll second.
You, Bill Turner, put the motion to the vote. Fillmore,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey,
Yeah.
Bill Turner.
Yeah, in favor.
Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, agenda item 15, 37 Broad Street. Frankie, to give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
37 Broad Street is a category 2 in Charlestown, circa 1800, the oldest district, requesting conceptual approval for reconstruction of storefront, facade alterations and interior addition. It's property's location on Broad Street. Existing site photo. Context of Broad Street. Historic photos of property. And some Sanborn maps. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening, board members. I'm Erin Lanier with Julia Martin Architects. I'm here tonight requesting conceptual approval for our project at 37 Broad Street. This is a unique property in many ways. It's one of the few in the area that occupies the full depth of the south from Broad Street to Elliott Street. It's been used as an office for most of the last century, but was recently purchased by next door with the intention of converting the entire property to his personal residence. You'll see as we go through the plans, our goal has been to restore and maintain the existing historic facades to the greatest extent possible, with improvements that contribute to the public realm. We've also looked to creatively develop functional living spaces that will allow for the building's adaptive reuse with minimal impact on the adjacent neighbors or the pedestrian experience.
Joel Adrian figured it out. I don't know how he did it.
It's
He was going side to
moody,
side.
though.
He was clicking the
It only
side
likes
arrows.
certain people like that.
It's rude.
And it aimed it at
It only
her.
likes
Yeah,
certain
aimed it at Frankie.
Yeah. I'll flip.
Oh, he did that.
No.
So here are some existing photos to help illustrate the unique configuration of this lot. It's essentially made up of 4 parts. There is the 3.5-story historic mass on Broad Street, then 2 two-story brick additions to the rear of that, and then finally a 1-story brick addition that fronts on Elliott Street. So you can see that sort of best here, 3.5-story mass, then a 2-story addition here, a small 2-story addition here, and then this 1-story piece with a small parking for Elliott. In terms of little context, you guys saw a presentation from Rhett Morgan, I think within the last year or so, for storefront improvements and an addition here. This is 28 Elliott Street, the Poinsett Tavern. Just sort of to get your bearings there on the back. Despite our building having such an expansive footprint, most of what we're proposing tonight is minimally, if at all, visible from the public right of way. One element of our design is to create an interior courtyard that will allow for natural light and outdoor space in the central part of the residence. We plan to do that by removing the flat roof and non-historic interior of the 2-story addition directly behind the main mass. So that's shown here, and we're talking about removing this flat roof and leaving the walls on the exterior so that the view from the street is unchanged. But internally, we'd have a nice garden space, and we'd expose the rear elevation of a 3.5-story portion so that that can be restored. Next slide. To briefly take you through what we know about the history and the evolution of this, this property, the main building was constructed about 1790. It looked a good bit different than it does today. The engraving you see here from the 1890s shows us a small portion of the facade at that time. And as you can see, it's not nearly as tall as it is today, and it lacks the cornice and elaborate cast iron details that are there now. Similar to other buildings on Broad Street, 37 likely underwent a significant renovation in the early 20th century that resulted in the increased height and those more elaborate details that are there now. Between 1902 and 1944, a series of 3-story additions and porches that were on the rear of the building were removed and replaced with a series of existing appendages that are there now, occupying the majority of the lot.
Those two have evolved over time and perhaps most notably through the infill of many of the original window openings as well as a former light well. The property underwent a second major renovation in the 1970s, through which time the storefront was altered to its current state and the interiors of the buildings were extensively modified to create individual office spaces throughout. Next slide. So these are our overall existing and proposed plans for both the first and second floor. And what I highlight here on the existing in particular is simply how the majority of the building is partitioned offices with very little evidence of the original layout or features beyond the exterior masonry walls. And for that reason, we feel quite comfortable opening up the central volume to create the interior courtyard. If you'd like to go to the next slide, show you some enlarged plans. So here you can see we're proposing to restore the storefront at the ground floor based on historic images from the early 20th century, as well as reconstructing the rear wall where it was previously removed. We know the existing circulation in the building is not original, so we're proposing to locate a new stair to access the 3 main floors and a new addition at the southwest corner of the main mass. We're also indicating an open terrace at the rear, which will provide a covered seating area and incorporate an outdoor fireplace. Next slide. At the back half of the property beyond the courtyard will be the guest quarters and some accessory spaces for things like the gym and storage. And here again, we'd like to introduce some natural light by adding 2 light monitors to the roof of the 1-story portion. As I mentioned before, there were previously quite a few window openings along the east side of these additions, but those were filled in over time and are not able to be reopened either due to subsequent construction next door or the fact that it's on the 0 lot line and would obviously would not want to intrude on the privacy of the neighbors because you have a private courtyard right adjacent. Next slide. Go to the next slide. So these are enlarged 3rd floor and attic plans, and I won't go into too much detail on those, but again, you can see the stair tower comes up to the 3rd floor and is going to sensitively tuck under the eave of the main roof. And then from there, there is an internal stair that takes you up to the attic space. That is going to be a finished attic level. And so one request that we're making as it relates to the attic and the exterior is to remove an existing sign backer that sits atop the main cornice and blocks the original dormer just behind it. And if you want to go to the next slide, you can see that here in the existing proposed elevations. That sign backer was added sometime in the early 20th century and originally read the Carolina Mutual Insurance Company. That lettering appears to have been removed as part of the 1970s renovation. And our feeling is that unlike many of the cast iron cornices you see around town, which have sort of this integrated sign or date or something, this is very much just sort of perched on top and tied back and feels like an afterthought. And so we're asking to remove that and to be able to properly utilize that attic space and have light enter through that dormer again. And I've got some additional photos of that sign backer if anybody would like to take a look at it. Also at the front elevation, we're excited to replace the 1970s era storefront with a new version based on historic photographs of the former storefront. This will include elements such as the decorative custom pilasters, stone bulkhead, and surrounding traditional storefront windows. Next slide. Here at the south elevation facing Elliott Street, we'll replace the non-historic doors with new doors and the arched openings, restore an infilled window, and then there you can see the new light monitors, which will not actually be visible from the street in reality. Further back is our new stair addition, and we're also proposing to restore the dormer up there that has lost a lot of its fenestration. We're also proposing a small new dormer on the west elevation. You won't be able to see that from anywhere, but again, just to bring some more natural light into this building, which is really limited from the east and west. Any kind of windows obviously have been closed or didn't exist to begin with. Let's see. One other thing I'll mention here is initially we had considered removing the flue that you see coming up there at that 1-story addition.
we have decided to just let that be, so you don't see it here in the proposed, but that will simply remain. Next slide. These are some interior elevations of the courtyard, not that this would be visible from anywhere, but just to better convey what we're trying to achieve. Next slide. The longitudinal site section showing each of the 4 volumes and the new stair tower in context. And I think this also really highlights how that inner courtyard anchors the design and allows this complex of buildings to function more elegantly. Next slide. This is a selection of precedents and materials we're proposing to incorporate. The stair addition would be a combination of slurred brick veneer with a copper reveal where it meets the sort wall. And then at the addition, as well as a few other non-historic openings, we'd like to use steel fenestration that would carry through to the terrace detailing. The storefront will be based on historic photos like the one shown here. And then finally, the existing parking court on Elliott will get a facelift by introducing local paving materials and a planting palette to really soften that space. Next slide. I'll end with some renderings of the courtyard and rear parking court, which further illustrates the high quality of this project. We're really looking forward to seeing these buildings get the attention and restoration that they deserve, and we hope you'll agree that our proposed design sensibly achieves this adaptive reuse in a way that also preserves the pedestrian experience and streetscape. That is all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Any questions?
Just a couple here. So it looked like, I guess, right behind the new storefront is their living room. Yeah. So I couldn't tell. There's a secondary line. Are you doing like little terrains or is that just like shades or curtains or drapes? I can't tell. There's a second line at the back of the storefront. That might just be the sill of the.
They might just, I don't know. Yeah, it's just they're just
Okay.
windows.
They're just windows.
They're just windows. Yeah.
Okay. And then so you basically, for all intents and purposes, gutting that middle section and creating a courtyard. Is there anything, just a question, about stabilizing those walls? Is there any buttressing or anything required for that? Or
You know, we haven't done demolition or anything like that yet. We do have a structural engineer involved, so it's certainly something we'll have to look at and make sure that, you know, it's very good shape.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. So, I mean, it's a cool concept. It's just figuring out, those. Okay, all right. All right.
No, I think this, obviously, I think the modifications to the storefront were positive. Taking it back to a more appropriate period. And it's the whole design in the interior courtyard is really very interesting and I think original and quite nice. A little unusual for residents on this part of a broad street instead of commercial in today's world, but it's unusual, but it's certainly not unknown. I mean, there's several.
Just keep it.
So yeah, I think it's a very nice project. To Bill's point, I've been there where you have 4 walls with no roof and no interior, and it's scary. You gotta figure that out. It's scary.
I don't have anything to add. I think it's all been said.
This is a nice project.
Very nice.
One more very quick question. So I was looking at your floor plans. When you reestablish the storefront, those doors, they're just fixed closed, but eventually, there are needs to some degree operable.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think they will use them, but it's our intention that if they were to ever decide to sell, that it would be used.
Okay, great. Okay.
Fire escape.
But they're indeed operable.
They are.
Right. Okay, cool.
Sounds like there's some consensus.
And staff will do their thing. Public comment.
Oh, that's right. We're not in.
Staff says.
All right, public comment.
They're not just hanging here to hang.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed this application for 37 Broad, and we appreciate the applicant reaching out to us. We are in support of every aspect of the project, except the removal of the remainder of the historic sign above the cornice. Signage such as this to be prevalent around the city. As time has passed, fewer and fewer of these signs remain. Even at 37 Broad Street, the lettering of the sign has been lost. However, we believe it is important to keep this remnant of the former sign as it tells the story of the evolution of this building. We respectfully recommend approval of all aspects of the project except the removal of the sign.
Laurel Fay with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The PSC appreciates the applicant reaching out to us on this project. Regarding changes to the primary Broad Street facade, we are supportive of the proposed storefront restoration, but struggle with the removal of the historic sign backing at the roof line. While the existing facade is not original, it has gained significance since the late 19th or early 20th century, and the signage structure is a character-defining feature of this design and typical of commercial architecture of this era on Broad Street. We ask that the board take this into consideration as part of tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Frank, you give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Right? Sorry.
Well, her comments and then you.
I'm gonna keep us on,
Thank you.
I'm gonna keep us in the correct procedure from now on.
That observation, while the front door repair may remain closed or inoperable, the return of this historic storefront is much appreciated and allows for flexibility in the long term. Additionally, the location of address numbers may clear any confusion about function. Staff confirm the very limited visibility of the new stair tower from Elliott Street and appreciate its contemporary design to juxtapose this historic building. Staff recommendation is conceptual approval with final review by staff of permit documents.
Now, Erin, you may respond.
I just wanted to reiterate that I've got some photos that we also shared with preservation ladies of the sign backer. And I want to clarify too that it's the way it is connected, would be not, disturbing the cornice in any way to remove it. It is like perched on top and like tied back in this way that is almost a little concerning. But it's really unfortunate to have it be there kind of blocking what little light comes into their vintage space. And obviously the name that was up there for probably about 50 years or so. This is an almost 200-year-old building. So in our minds, it's a relatively limited portion of the history of this.
Can we see those photos? He doesn't want a Schuler building. Written up there.
How far, just while you're doing that, how far in front of the dormer windows would the sign backer be?
So these are some photographs of the attic as it is now. It's kind of just been mechanical for a long time. And you can see in the second photo that when they added that cornice out front, they had to basically truncate the dormer windows that have been there. So we're limited in the amount of light that we get anyway, but when you look out the window, that's what it is right there. And so, yeah, it's not, obviously, if it were name, if it were an integral part, I'm sorry.
It's been single flex too.
Of
Very
the,
heavily.
that this is the cornice and then,
Yeah,
and then this is the design.
I mean, if it's sound, it could very possibly be removed, delicately stored and preserved. And if anybody ever wanted to sign back on.
Sure, baby.
Right. Public comment in the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote. Even though we had some board discussion during the question period, but.
While we're talking, Frank, can you do the page with the historic photograph montage on it? Yeah, thank you. Is that it in the 1924 photo?
That's as we can tell.
Is that it? Is that it?
That's what I was looking at. I don't.
That's what I was trying to figure out.
It's our best guess, but it is, yeah.
Got the flagpole and stuff. Yeah, there's the flagpole. Yeah. So it's been up there about 100 years. Is that about right? At least, okay. Ain't that great, but it's been there. It's historic. Significantly historic. Yeah.
Does it fall into the category of things perhaps we shouldn't be preserving? I'm not saying it does. There's other clear examples of that in other parts of the peninsula, but just throwing it out there.
I mean, 50 years, I can kind of maybe look around. 100 years, a little tougher. A few different things on history. I'll just start out just saying, if we're in comments, I mean, I like the whole thing. That's a very well conceived, really interesting project. It's really cool. The idea that you found a way to, create a courtyard by removing square footage, kudos to you guys for coming up with it and your client for going with it. And,
The say is the.
oh, okay, well, kudos to your client. Being willing to do that. It's a really cool concept. I like everything about it. I guess that is the sticking point, and I definitely do hear what you guys are saying, because I mean, there's a almost 100-year-old photograph and it's there, and it could have even been there for a while, right? So, well, I mean, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
No, I'm leaning towards keep it. I mean, now that it's the photograph, it,
And
if it was 70s, I would feel differently, but 1926.
It doesn't have, I mean, I agree, it's been there for a very long time, so that's a real struggle for me, but at the same time, it's not much detail to it.
there's not much detail to it, but that pole was there.
Yeah, true.
And although it looks like sort of stuck up there in a half-hearted fashion, it's been up there a long time. It's survivor.
Yeah, my instinct is it's probably been, rebuilt 3 or 4 times, because looking at the photographs, then it's happened. But it does look like, well, I can't tell. Yeah, it's just.
You think
It's sheet metal and
sheet metal
and seal effects and seal effects.
Post earthquake, like,
Yeah.
they're doing that sheet metal.
How close is the window?
Probably been, obviously it's been reattached several times, but it's probably basically the same concept as when it was put up there.
Yeah.
100 years
Turn of
ago.
the century, and they're buying it, and could have bought that out of WF Norman or somewhere like that. Put that up there, But it's pretty cool.
How much of the dormer would become visible, do you think?
From the street?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's better to keep the sign ban, or to show the dormer again, if the dormer would be visible. It may not, I don't think you would be able to. Yeah.
Sorry.
That would
Yeah,
just be minimally,
I think from across the street, your sight line would probably be above that.
Yeah.
It's really a call. I just, my gut says because it's that old, I think.
I mean,
And it tells the story of
there,
the
putting my
building.
hands on it, and seeing if there's anything, really significant left of original about it. It's I'm fine to agree with you.
And they also always have an option to come back and do that. They can present it to staff, and he goes forward with that. show that it had been rebuilt several times, like, all that. I think the gut check right now.
It is pretty visible from the street, too. It's pretty prominent, that building.
Well,
Walk past that building. over and over.
I'll float a motion, given the fact that obviously if you find something later, you guys, I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys know, if you find something that makes your case, bring it back. I'll make a motion for, what do we have to do now? We have to make it.
She asked for conceptual.
Oh,
Yes, for conceptual.
so what do I do if I want to go further than that?
Well, I think it's, you wanna, you,
I want to go like a down the line, I could call it preliminary with final review by staff.
I think
Conceptual?
you can do that because it was. I think we
Are
can.
there enough
I mean,
drawings
this
that
is
it's
at a
preliminary?
conceptual
Is
stage.
this a middle preliminary level? Should I?
We were checking to see if it was a preliminary since they were only asking
Okay,
conceptual.
well, if I can go to conceptual final detail system. I'll make a motion for conceptual approval. With the exception of the removal of the, what do you call it? The
Sign backer.
Backer. The sign backer to remain and final review by staff.
Okay, so I've got a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with the exception of removal of the sign backer. With final review by staff, permit documents.
It's fine. The thing.
Yeah.
Okay, do I have a second for Bill's motion?
I'll say.
One more, the motion to vote, Bill Turner,
Yeah, in favor.
Bill Huey,
Yeah.
Bill Moore.
Yeah.
Chair vote to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Do you have a second?
Second.
All in